All right, we are going to go ahead and get started in the next few seconds. All right, so good evening. This is our business meeting. It's actually a work session and a combined business meeting on June the 2nd. We're going to call the meeting to order at 6:05 p.m. And we're going to move to item 2, which is roll call. Mr. Gaskins, if you would roll call for us.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Gallagher, Ms. Davis,
Here.
Dr. Yeager,
Here.
Dr. Dykeman,
Here.
Dr. Anderson.
Here.
She is here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Dr. Gant,
Oh.
Here.
Ms. Hull,
Here.
and Dr. Maddox.
All right, thank you. So we do have a quorum present. We'll move forward to item 3, and this is our silent meditation and pledge of allegiance. If you would first join me for a moment of silent meditation. All right, thank you. And if you would, if you're able, stand and join us with the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. We'll move forward to item 2, and these are our recognitions and awards.
Dr. Gant, we do not have any recognitions or awards tonight.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gaskins. Any board announcements or recognitions? All right. Okay, no board announcements or recognitions.
Okay, wait a minute. I thought of one. Sorry.
Okay.
So on the 21st of May, we had the second annual symposium on the history of slavery at the University of Georgia. And that is a one-day symposium where we look at the history of education in Clark County and how the Athens has changed as a result of the university and the things that happened here. This year, we were favored with starting this day-long celebration at the historic Brooklyn Cemetery right behind Clark Middle School. We had two young ladies from Katie Johnson's peer leadership class, and they literally wrote a rap music song about their experience in exploring African American history in Athens, Clark County. That rap will be included in the archives at the University of Georgia for them participating in that event. So I commend Katie Johnson for the excellent work that she does with the peer leadership group and our two performers. And I'm sorry I don't have their names in front of me, but I will send that to the board so that you'll know. Thank you.
And I'll just say very briefly that I don't recall the exact date, but I know Dr. Anderson and Dr. Yeager and myself attended the Athens Clark County School Attendance Protocol with the juvenile court here. And so if anyone is looking to serve on that, that is definitely an open invitation. And I think Crystal Gillis is going to be the liaison for the Clark County School District with the court. But if anyone is interested in those meetings, I can make sure that the email is sent out once we have another meeting.
Thank you. That would be great if you could share that information. Dr. Yeager.
I just thought of one. So I wanted to note that we had an election last month and that we have 3 newly elected board members, and I'd like to formally welcome them. Heidi Hensley, Tim Denson, and Mark Evans. And if you're listening, please join us in our work sessions, and I guess we have a retreat coming up at some point. We want to invite them to join us in all of those trainings that we have.
Yep. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that under the update, my
Okay.
update,
Great.
selecting a date, but absolutely welcome, and yeah, they're absolutely welcome to join us.
Great, thank you.
And I'll just sort of shout out all of the graduates again. I know we're sort of, we are all fatigued. I can only imagine the district, just the efforts, not, with the district and parents and our students at Clark Central, Cedar, and Classic City High School. And so very proud of you all. Dr. Anderson?
Oh, nothing. I was just, yes, absolutely. Celebrate those recent graduates.
All right, thank you. So we'll move forward to item 3, and this is our public comment. From my understanding, we do not have anyone signed up for public comment. Ms. Palmer, is that correct? Mr. Gaskins, okay. All right, we're going to move forward to item 4, and this is to amend and or adopt the agenda, but I think you wanted to make a change before we...
Yes, ma'am. So we would like to remove item 11.3, which is policy IFBG, Internet Acceptable Use. That policy needs additional revision, so we would like to bring it back in either July or August.
All right, so that item has been removed, and then we'll open up the floor to amend and or adopt the agenda. Ms. Davis, I think you mentioned that you wanted to make a motion.
Yes, I would like to amend the agenda to move item 13.2 after our executive session.
Second.
Which is item 16. Thank you.
I had a follow. Okay, is it just item 13.2, or is it 13.1 and 13.2, Ms. Davis?
I'm not sure where that particular concern I have
think
is,
it's
so we'll just move
13.2.
item 13, I think it's 13.2, is that
Okay,
correct?
I just wanted to be sure.
13.2.
You want both 1 and 2?
No, no.
No, it was just
The
13.
one you're asking about is 13.2.
13.2 is correct.
Okay, so we have a motion on.
It is.
We have a motion on the floor to move item 13.2 to basically it would then be item 17. So after that executive session, is there a second?
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any follow-up questions, comments, or concerns?
I have one quick one. Oftentimes, the staff leave when we do our executive sessions. Are we going to require them to stay through our executive session?
It does seem that it's a personnel item, so I would think at the very least that Mr. Gaskins and Dr. Blankenship would probably need to be here. But I'm going to, let me defer to you. Okay.
Thank you.
And Mr. Pruitt, but all right. And so we have a second and a motion to move that item until after the executive session. And so all in favor of then adopting the agenda as amended, if you would raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that motion carries. Dr. Anderson?
Aye.
Okay. All right. So we'll move forward to our informational items. And this is number 5. So we have the first thing is the Athens Community Career Academy report. All right, the Early Head Start Policy Council meeting minutes and report.
Dr. Gant, can I clarify something real quick?
Yes,
Dr. Gant, can you guys hear me?
we can.
So there was a question in the email about whether I was elected by the Early Head Start committee, policy committee, to sit on that committee, and that's not my place in the committee. We basically decided that I would sit on that committee as a non-voting member of that policy committee. So I just wanted to clarify that because it was a question in one of the emails that were going around about tonight's meeting.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. We will, any other questions about the early Head Start? Or any comments? All right, what about our SPLOS report?
It's very long.
What was that, Ms. Davis?
It's very long, very thorough. Thank you.
All right, we'll move forward then with our board and community reports. Okay, and we'll start with the Community Oversight Committee and SPLOS report. Any just follow-up comments or questions?
Are you still sitting on that committee? Okay.
So Ms. Davis joined me at the last meeting, which was great. You asked some great questions.
All right. All right, the Georgia School Boards Association. I think the only thing I remember, Ms. Palmer did send out an email message, just an update of our board colleagues that will be traveling. And so we do want to thank you all for representing, Clark County School District, and we're looking forward to hearing a report out. And then I think she may have also mentioned if there were any individuals that still wanted to go, that she could check and see if that was a possibility. So just a reminder, if you're a person who is not going, you're interested in going, to check with Ms. Palmer.
Can we go back to the SPLOS one?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Gilbert? So my question is about the cafeteria at the East, the Learning Center East. Did we get that finished? Early Learn. On the East.
Mr. Gilbert, can you turn your mic on for us?
There we go. Yes, we're done at Old Gaines, and also we finished up across the road. So they had equipment start up the past couple of days.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move forward then to our advisory board reports. I know we have several. Oh, Ms. Hall.
I just had a question about the Georgia Association School Board.
Oh, sure.
Have we as a board ever applied to receive any type of recognition? Do you know?
We have not. I know this has been something that Ms. Davis has talked about for several years, actually. And I think Ms. Palmer and Dr. Thomas have sent us updates to the categories, like the criteria. I think they've changed a little bit. But if that is something that the board is interested in, it certainly is something that we can place on one of our future, as one of our future agenda items, and then just sort of talk through which of those areas we feel like we've met, others that we may have a plan to meet. And you all will also, I think you're traveling with, and so it may be a good time to speak with, Julie, Sam, or really anybody from GSBA. But I know that is something that has been brought up several times as far as our work as a board together. And so I would certainly encourage you and Ms. Davis, if you are feeling that we want to go in that area, to pursue that and just sort of, we have the information, but it's a different thing to say that we're going to collectively take that step and apply for that.
Thank you.
So to answer your question, we have not.
I would suggest that we start with the accrediting agency standards because they've changed them for the board recognition. And so I believe if we, hit a home run on that, we'll definitely knock out anything that GSBA is asking us to do. I think they're going to be somewhat aligned because I know GSBA had withdrawn their application process until after Cognia completed theirs. And so they've released that one, and that was the one that I asked that we definitely look at working toward rather than trying to work our way out of what we're currently in, just work toward becoming that board of excellence and see if that doesn't take care of the other stuff. That was my recommendation.
Other questions? Okay. All right, we're going to talk a little bit, this is about our advisory board reports. Any follow-up comments or questions about the information that we have?
I was excited, and I appreciate the students that came out for the superintendent's student advisory. I hope that we can hear more from them and make sure that they have a voice in decision making.
Yep, I got to hear some of it. Not all, I wasn't here, but I did. From my understanding, there is some things that they talked about that may be some low-hanging fruit, right, from a budgeting perspective that could possibly come from a variety of different areas, be it superintendent funding or many other areas. And so, yeah, I think I would echo that, and hoping that we can hear updates on some of the things that they want to do. I know that they do meet pretty regularly. I think they're a pretty consistent group, and so.
And I believe their request was to meet more regularly.
Oh, yeah?
So I think we will try to figure out how we can do that.
Okay. Yeah, and that may be something that we can all keep on our radar so that as we're, scheduling the school year and we're looking at the work session agenda items possible. It's all tentative at, this early, but we can be sure that we, ask to have them come back and like a report out and some updates on the progress. So. All right. Any additional comments? All right, let's move forward to the board president's report. And Dr. Anderson, I can't fully remember. I know that there's one thing that we definitely want to do, and that is we need to decide on a date for our retreat. Ms. Palmer sent out a survey or a questionnaire, I think it was, about possible dates, and we were sort of split, right? There were some people that were available, 3 people available on one day, 3 people available on a different day. Ms. Palmer, can you remind us what those dates were? But while she's looking at that, some of those dates were, I think it was a couple that were in July and a couple in August. And so I do want us to spend some time while we have all of us here confirming a date for our retreat, because there have been a few different things that have come up really over the past year that we want to be sure that we carve out some time to talk about. And if just to provide a brief update, if you recall, we were originally going to have our retreat in Savannah in June, and it turned out that 2 or 3 people couldn't make it, and that then increased to others. And so we decided at that point just to decide on another date. Ideally, this is something where all of us can attend. Okay, so July 21st had 2 board members. July 22nd and July 23rd had 3 board members. And July 14th had 3 board members. Okay, August 19th and 20th, 3 board members. Okay, the 11th, 1. Okay, and so August 26th and 27th had 3 board members. So our work for right now is to is to confirm a day or 2, whatever it is going to be for our retreat, because we are a bit delayed with our summer retreat.
I can be flexible with any day except for July 14th. I would not be able to do July 14th, but I can move other things around to accommodate the group.
Okay. Thank you.
I believe I can be flexible this summer. Okay. With with all of the dates except for, I think you said August 19th and 20th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I won't. That's my birthday.
Okay.
I invite y'all to the party.
You don't want to celebrate? You don't want? We can have a
You can
retreat
come
slash
with
birthday
me.
party.
I don't think it'll be appropriate here. You coming? Okay.
So what was the late July dates?
The late July dates were the 22nd and 23rd. 3 people could attend.
So could the others that are here that didn't? So is it only 3 people because 6 could not, or it's only 3 people because only 3 people did the poll?
Oh, only 3 people responded. Okay. And the 22nd and 23rd, I will actually be away from any internet access or anything like that.
Okay, so that's not.
But
a
I
good
think I
time.
may have, that was one that I didn't vote on. But any other dates, I think I put in my response, I could be flexible.
So we just had oops, sorry. God, move this away. Stop. So July 14th, she cannot. You just said the 22nd and the 23rd, you cannot. So that moves us to the first date in August, right? Because there were only those 2 dates in July.
Yep, it moves us to August the 11th, August 26th or 27th,
So August
and July
11th,
21st.
the 11th is a board meeting, so we have to be here anyway. Or we should be here anyway. I can do the 11th. I can do the 20-somethings. If you push it to, I mean, the UGA starts on the 17th, so are we planning it all day like on the Friday, or is it Friday night?
Yeah, there were time periods, but really, I think only a few people completed like the survey, and so right now, we can stick with these dates, we can change the times, we can throw another date out there, but really the goal for right now is for us to, confirm a time.
Which we've determined, or none of them will work. So we can't do the July. So what about the August?
The only one that'll work for August would be the 26th and the 27th. Because Tawana can't do she can't do 19th and 20th. The 11th is out there.
Can you do the 18th, Tawana?
So I think the dates that we have are, what was that?
Sorry about that. Tish asked if I could do the 18th. I can do the 18th. That's a Thursday, right?
It is.
Oh, I can do that.
I can't do that.
I cannot.
You're talking about August 18th, was that?
That's what she asked. Yeah.
How about the 11th?
Oh, it was up there.
I could do the 11th.
The 11th?
I can do the 11th.
August 11th.
That's board meeting.
But during the day.
So we would just live here that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're talking about an 8-hour day and board retreat, and then following up with our regular board meeting at 11 o'clock, at 6 o'clock.
That is correct.
But we do have a work session on August 4th, so the board meeting could be brief if we're on top of it.
When?
I'd rather do a marathon than 2 weeks of being here all night. I'm sorry, it's summer. I'll have to push back a little bit.
Okay, so we're looking
I'd rather
at
do one
August,
day and be long than 2 days long.
so we're thinking about August the 11th,
Yes.
Or we also have July 21st, or was that ruled out too? Was that ruled out?
21st is not up there.
It's a Thursday.
Well, Madam Chair, can I ask, do we have to have a consecutive block for a retreat? Can we like stagger it a couple of hours for each board meeting? Or does
Tell
it-
me, say more about that.
So if we're regularly meeting at 6 o'clock for board meetings, could we, for the next couple board meetings, come at 5 o'clock to address one of those topics? Or does it have to be a consecutive chunk of time
Oh, you're talking about for the retreat.
for the retreat?
It depends on what the board wants to do. I think it just, yeah, I'm gonna defer to the board before I share my
Does staff
opinion.
have to be at the retreat?
Well, no, last time, there is some staff there, it just sort of depends on what we have that we're talking about. Dr. Anderson did send out a draft agenda of our retreat, I think maybe a couple of months ago. And so that will be, for the most part, those are some of the things we'll be talking about, but there are also a couple of things that have been, that we've pulled. So for instance, when we've had like future business items, we've looked at like, okay, is that an agenda item, or is it really something that we may want to talk a little bit more about in a retreat? And so I guess to answer your question, Ms. Hull, it's going to depend on what the board wants to do.
I'm going to go on record as saying, when I think about a retreat, I think about a time for us to just kind of leave everything behind and put all energy into the particular thing we're trying to solve or address. And so I'm going to ask that we try and respect that as the kind of the operating space for that retreat. I think, you know, breaking it up into 2 different days would be fine. I don't have a problem with that, but I don't want to sandwich the board retreat between a work session and a regular meeting. I think that just takes too much energy there.
Then my only concern would be having a marathon day on a board meeting, because if we are gonna really focus that energy, I know once we hit 11 o'clock, you
Yeah.
know, we're
That's
just
just-
exhausted.
I
And
think
so-
8 hours of this is a lot, so.
So.
When we came up with those
It,
dates, what caused those dates to? Right. Right. So was July 11th one of the dates that you put forward? Oh, it's July 21st? I'm curious. Okay. so-
Yep, we have July 21st, I think August the 11th, and if my notes are correct, August the 11th is a regular meeting, right? It's not a work session, and so theoretically, that should be a very quick meeting. But we have control over that. And so if it is an all-day meeting, by the time we get to we have some control over if we want to add a break after our, board meeting to do dinner before the business meeting. We also have some control over how long the business meeting lasts. And so, yeah, so we have the 11th, and then we also have August 26th, 27th. Those are the dates that I have that are left where they don't conflict. Those are the ones that are open, based on what we've shared of the dates that absolutely will not work.
I would invite us to consider the 26th or the 27th. While we usually feel like we have control over business meetings, I can always foresee some catastrophe or sensational event happening, and public comment maybe being a lot of time allotted. So maybe if we could look at the 26th or the 27th.
So then I'm going to chime in and say I might not be here for that because I'm moving my kid into college on that weekend. I have the 25th on my calendar, but I have to drive back from Virginia. So I could maybe be here by Friday night, the 26th, maybe. I'm not sure what the timing is. I could certainly probably, well, I don't know, be here by the 27th.
Okay, so we have a possibility of the 27th, the 21st, and August 11th.
I cannot do August the 11th.
The 21st.
Okay, yeah, so
the
it
21st
was
is
to
on
be
the
the
list.
night of the 26th and then the morning of the 27th.
What was that, Dr. Dykeman? And then Dr. Anderson mentioned something.
I was just saying, the 26th, 27th was a combined, like, the night of the 26th and the morning of the 27th, not one or the other.
Yeah, or we can decide that it'll just be all on the 27th. We do have some discretion here as far as what we want to happen, but I do think we need, 6 or 7 hours, I would think. That would allow us time to cover some things, make some future topics that we want to talk about, get some strategic updates, do some team building, basically the things that were shared. Dr. Anderson?
I was just stating that I cannot do August 11th.
If we're able to do all day on the 27th and set it up as a retreat, will that give us an opportunity to invite our new board members to also participate?
I think
I'm
we
sorry,
invite
Ms.
them
Holt, can
anyway.
you
I
say
mean,
that
whatever
again?
date we pick, we invite them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we would definitely.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about if it's a weekend, it may be more amenable to their schedules or to everybody's schedule.
They're going to have to get used to Thursdays. Sorry.
All right, so what was that suggestion, that we do a
If
week?
we do all day the 27th, just make that a full retreat, show up in blue jeans, let's have some pizza and just make a day of it.
Okay, does August 27th work for everyone as a full day? Yes, it works for you,
I can make it.
Ms. Hull,
Yes.
Dr. Dykeman, Dr. Yeager.
I mean, this is the one where I'm moving my kid in, so I don't know the schedule, but I would certainly try to be here.
Okay, Ms. Davis.
It's my sister's birthday, but I will try to be here.
Okay, Ms. Gallagher. All right, so we have two possibles for the 20, that are tentative, for the 27th all day. What about July 21st? Oh, who can't be here? Kara, you're,
July 21st? Is it, yeah, I can.
You
can.
can.
You
Didn't you say you were going to be?
I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
won't
you
be
can.
here, sorry. But that's one versus a possible two. All right, so we have the 21st as a possibility with one person not able to be here, and then we have the 27th with two possible people that can
I will be here.
attend.
I may leave early, but I will be here on the 27th.
Okay, so you will definitely be here on the 27th.
And I'm Googling, sorry. It looks like they said move-in is either Thursday, the 25th, or Friday, the 26th. So, and I don't know that he's been assigned one or the other yet.
Mhm, mhm.
And it's a how far of a drive? Hang on. I think it's a all-night.
Oh, that's terrible.
All right, so I'm going to recommend then that we go with the 27th. Are you all okay with that?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager, are you okay with that?
I'll do my best. It's a 9-hour and 52-minute drive.
What about July 21st again? What happened there? That's when you can't be there.
I can't be here, but I'm
Okay.
fully okay with you
Oh, no,
all
ma'am.
having it.
Nope, we know we're not gonna do that.
I don't have anyone to move in. I'm just going to be on vacation, so
What were you saying?
what was that, Ms. Palmer?
I could do that. Saturday, the 23rd?
Of July.
Yes.
That could possibly work for me. It's a possible, I'm not sure. No, because I think we'll have our whole board, which is why I didn't say everyone, needs to be here, but it's just ideal if everyone can, since this is a time for us to really discuss things that we're not able to, that aren't on the agenda, and so.
This is in the middle of the superintendent search. planning for that. And so, I mean, I'm concerned that we can't find dates that we can all meet, and that's going to require a little bit more commitment than we seem to be able to muster right now.
Yeah, I would agree. But I also know that we're working, we just really pull from July, is sort of I think, a strange month, at least with the district and the superintendent's calendar and availability. But I do hear your concerns. All right, so our 27th, we have a 9 until 3, I would say 9 until 4 to be safe.
On August 27th? Yeah.
All right, so we have that as our official time, unless by some miracle, one of us finds a date, a totally separate date that all of us are available, and it doesn't seem like that's gonna happen. So,
I think this is a wrap, because my summer is getting planned, Dr. Gant.
So this is my question. Did only 4 people respond to the poll? Because I know 3 responded. I did respond, right? I'm pretty sure I did. But
I did not.
I want us to do at least this. If we get the poll, if everybody could do that ahead of time, then we could have saved 25 minutes of conversation here.
well, I think we could have, but the thing is, we had sent it out, and so what Dr. Anderson and I discussed, and Dr. Thomas, is that because a lot of this gets lost in email, honestly,
Yeah, I can see
and for a variety of different reasons. I won't speculate, it was only 3 people. And so instead of sending out another poll and saying, can you all do this, we thought that we would prioritize it tonight, because we are really at crunch time. Like, we should have had a retreat during the summer and one in the winter. And so I do hear what you're saying, but this is sort of where we were. We did try to send out that link. And maybe, I think it was actually 2 different links and a reminder.
A thunderstorm.
Yes. Yeah, I just saw it popped up on my phone.
Okay, I'm just asking us to help ourselves a little bit.
Yeah. And maybe there's something in there for me to do, so if you all think about it, like if it helps if I, send off a text and say, hey, complete this survey really quick, because I know for me, if I get a whole lot of different emails, I can get lost in them, and I respond to text a little bit more. So, Ms. Davis, maybe there are some things that I can do on my end to help remind us as
I'm not
well.
criticizing anybody. I just want us to, again, as we look forward to the really big things that are coming, and we've heard from Lisa already, and we've also heard from Dr. Thomas, that time is urgent for them. So I want us to see if we can prioritize this a little bit for
Yeah.
the next few weeks. That would be very helpful, I think.
Yeah. All right.
Well, I
we're-
apologize, I still don't see it. I'm sure it's in here.
The poll, yeah, it may have came from, it came from Ms. Palmer. So it didn't come from me or Dr. Anderson.
New school board members will be invited to that retreat. The newly elected school board members.
Yes. Yep.
All right.
They will definitely be invited. We didn't use their, we didn't know at that time, so yep. All right, well, thank you all. So we do have a date, and yes, Ms. Davis, your concerns are heard. We'll move forward to the superintendent's report. In Dr. Thomas's absence, Mr. Gaskins, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Yes, ma'am. So we do have just 3 announcements that I wanted to share with you all. So I wanted to reiterate that last week we celebrated the graduating class of 2022 from our 3 high schools. We had 239 graduates from Cedar Shoals. It is good. 352 graduates from from Clark Central, and we had 19 graduates from Classic City. And so we will have our finalized graduation rates, which is also important, when the Georgia Department of Education releases those numbers in early September. So when we know those graduation rates, we will share those with the board as well as with the community. Something that we are excited to announce as it relates to our graduation and some feedback that we received from parents last year is that we are starting a new program that helps our graduates over the summer. So we met with all graduating seniors during their graduation practice practices to let them know that they have access to their school counselor or a school counselor during the summer. So these counselors can assist them with submitting college applications if they haven't done so already, requesting or submitting transcripts, registering for campus housing, orientation, or completing financial aid. Our counselors can also help students that are prepared to enter the workforce or are currently looking for a job. So we'll have 3 counselors supporting students who have graduated, but also any student that needs counseling support throughout the summer. So this specific program is really focused on 3 things. One is to reduce the rate of summer melt as measured by our senior exit survey and national clearinghouse data. So summer melt is a term that we use that students who are accepted to college but don't attend in the fall. So basically their interest melts away. We're trying to prevent the melt through this program. Also, we want to increase the graduates with a structured post-secondary plan, including those that are going into the workplace. And then third, increase of students reporting that they have secured employment that pays above $12 an hour. So we'll be taking those metrics throughout the summer to assess the impact of this program. The other item we want to share is summer school. Summer programming starts on Monday, June 6th. So we have 193 teachers and staff that will welcome over 1,900 pre-K through 12th grade students at 11 campuses across our district for summer programming. These programs will be hands-on learning that will bridge students' learning for their next grade level. In addition, we will serve 120 students in partnerships with universities in our community. So we have a partnership with the University of Georgia, the University of North Georgia, that will be doing our SOAR program, our Innovative U program, and also a new program called Horizons that Barnett Shoals will be piloting with their kindergarten and first grade students that will be held at the University of Georgia. Also, our nutrition department is prepared to feed over 3,000 students across our community. So they will be providing breakfast and lunch to students attending programs at our Boys and Girls Club, at our Beach Haven Baptist Church, Timothy Baptist Church, Mount Pleasant Baptist Churches, and our Athens Leisure Services. And then the last update, which we're really excited about, is that Widespread Panic's Tunes for Tots Foundation has donated $75,000 to our music programs for the purchase of instruments and equipment for all of our K-12 schools. This is their second donation we received from this group. Last year we received $25,000, and we're excited to take an extra $50,000 this year. So instruments and equipment will be purchased with this generous donation to continue to support our music programs. I know there was a question related to supporting our fine arts program, and I did have an opportunity to answer that today. I'm sorry it was delayed, but we have increased our fine arts funding over the last couple of years. Last year, we did a one-time increase allotment of $166,000 to replace some big ticket items that were lacking in our art and music programs, such as some of the instruments are very expensive. And in our art programs, they need kilns for sculpture and things of that nature. So I did add that information. And we supplement our fine arts programming. Schools are responsible for using their budgets to support that, and we provide additional funding. But I wanted to say that our fine arts coordinator, Dan Smith, works very closely with all our fine arts teachers around their needs. And so we want to be able to support them at the district first, but he is also good at securing additional grants from our community that continues to support them. And so those are all of our updates.
Thank you. Yes, questions?
Thank you for that finance question. That was mine. I have one other question about your first item, which was the counselors over the summer. I think we talked about the counselors over Christmas break being also a really important time because of all the kids applying. Most of the deadlines are either in December or January or early January, February, and I know a lot of kids at Cedar had a hard time getting some of the information. Is that, I know we talked about it, and you can answer it later, but I just wanted to remember that that was a request. I've heard from a lot of parents saying that having at least one person available over Christmas break would be really helpful.
So we did receive that feedback. Two things that we are planning on doing is, one is that there is an advisement committee of counselors and teachers that are redoing advisement to help with some of that. So we're kind of front-loading some of the things that students would need. And then I will take back that if we can have a counselor or two available over Christmas break, we can definitely try to do that as well.
I'm just happy to see fine arts getting an extra boost. I think that's where we get to see our talent and where we get to actually experience becoming the person that we want to be. So I'm very, very appreciative of that.
All right, thank you for those updates, Mr. Gaskins. We are going to move to item 10, and these are our presentations and discussions. Mr. Gaskins?
Yes, I will ask that Dr. Watley, our Executive Director of Student Supports, as well as Dr. Yativia Tolbert, our Director of Restorative Practice, to come forward with our presentation for tonight. Dr. Watley, I'm sorry, I don't believe it's on.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, everyone. So tonight, we're going to go back to a little bit of the strategy that I presented on in the fall and previous years, and working with Dr. Welch around the strategy of the three Ps, and talk about where we've gone from there and where we are now with discipline in CCSD. Reform takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. It's very intentional, and sometimes we go slow, and sometimes we go steady, sometimes we go fast. So just go with me here. And Dr. Tolbert will come up and present the second half of this presentation. So as you remember, the purpose of this is to provide district leaders with an update on discipline, the protocols we've established, procedures related to discipline in CCSD. Our desired outcome for CCSD and restorative discipline is to build a foundation of restorative practices in schools to create a culture that actively invests in relationships among students, among staff, and our community. We are committed to reducing the use of exclusionary practices in schools and providing every student with an equitable learning opportunity. So as we remember, the Welch report from about 2 years ago had serious recommendations, and those recommendations were as follows. Elementary schools, reduce the use of OSS for students in K2, except in situations of serious physical injury. For middle schools, reduce the use of OSS for subjective offenses. And for high school, reduce the use of OSS for attendance-related infractions, those including tardiness, unexcused absences, leaving school without permission, and dress code violations. And lastly, reduce the use of OSS for subjective offenses. So we decided on 3 routes. We had to change our policies. Last year, we had an overhaul of our policies in student services, and upwards to about 30 policies were revised. Next, we had to change our programming, and then we had to add additional personnel in order to be really intentional and laser focused on discipline. So last year, if you will remember, we reviewed the student code of conduct. We made intentional sweeps to lift student services and talk about services that are provided to students before we get to disciplinary infractions. This year, we took a look at the discipline matrix with that discipline team, which Dr. Tolbert will talk about. We're also in the process of reviewing our attendance policy with Attorney Hole. You spoke a little bit about Ms. Gillis is attending those meetings, and we're working through that, and we have some ideas around how we can increase attendance for next year, and a review of schools' overall approaches to our subjective offenses. which we've had very great conversation in our discipline task force, which is comprised of principals from the elementary, middle, and high school, as well as our directors in counseling, social work, psychology, and the like. So the 3 routes: professional learning for our school leaders. It's important for us to provide that groundwork around what are our expectations for discipline in this district. Professional learning not only for our leaders, but also for our teachers, because most of these infractions occur not only in our schools, but if we go down to the finite pieces of it, it occurs in classrooms, it occurs on buses. So we've been very intentional around providing professional learning for our bus drivers this year, around restorative practices, PBIS, SEL, and how they can create a climate and culture on a bus, because a bus is an extension of a classroom and a school. Bolstering SEL for students with PBIS, support and expand restorative discipline initiatives. As it relates to our personnel, thank you, board, for allowing us to hire our first director of restorative discipline, Dr. Utibia Tolbert. Here are a list of things that she is leading in our district as it relates to discipline. I'll just highlight a few of those. She is facilitating restorative circles. She is leading the restorative work in our district, reviewing school and district data to identify trends and reduce patterns within certain schools, even down to the grade level, because we are noticing that even within a school, when we start looking at grade level, some things are grade level specific. It's not an entire school. We have to take in consideration that some of our students have endured a pandemic, and they are now back in school, and so 4th and 5th grade were hot spots, 9th and 10th grade were hot spots, and that's just not in CCSD. We're looking at national trends as well. Collaborate with school leaders to implement interventions and support, and to also increase our culture and climate of our school. One thing that we were very intentional about doing this year is to make sure that our principals and our leaders had a threat assessment protocol. In light of what has happened last week in Texas, I cannot say that I'm super proud of CCSD for taking that move to partner with Sigma Threat Assessment. They have trained our principals, they have trained our district staff, and they are coming in June to train our local school-based teams to make sure that we are ready to protect our children and our staff. Personnel will continue. These are some other things that Dr. Tobler is charged with doing. Developing presentations and trainings for community members as well as for the board, assisting with cross-training, conducting quality reviews and develop action plans as needed as it relates to schools, and partnering with our principals and our leaders around discipline in schools is a really huge part around the work that she is leading. So the restorative practice strategy, initially we adopted the strategy of the train-the-trainer model. The goal here is for restorative practices to not be a program, but to be embedded in our culture and climate. It's how we do business here. It's how we live. It's from teacher, it's to the custodial staff, it's to bus drivers, it's to me, it's to everyone. It is not a program. And so when we think about it from that mindset, the train-the-trainer model empowers us as staff in CCSD to be able to take this work, to hit the ground running, to be able to articulate the language of restorative practices. So under the leadership of myself and Director of Restorative Discipline, we are cross-collaborating with the Director of School Counseling, as well as the social work services, and as well as behavior specialists. We have a targeted focus of rigorous training and coaching support for district leaders, for school administrators, and school-based support teams. Each school will designate a restorative leadership team through the implementation process, will oversee and support the implementation locally. Each RLT member will participate in IRRP's online and face-to-face training. The goal is to create an internal function to continue to train and educate all staff. And I will toss it over to my colleague, Dr. Tolbert.
And while she's coming up, did you say Dr.
Yes,
Tolbert? You said doctor?
Yes, I did.
Doctor?
Yes, I did.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Good evening, board members, district members, our staff. Dr. Watley has done an awesome job of bringing you up to date with the work that we're doing with discipline as well as restorative practices. So where are we now? Where are we going? Where will we be hopefully by the end of next year? The slide that's before you provides you with an overview of the difference between IIRP, which is the International Institute of Restorative Practices, and GCC, which is the Georgia Conflict Center. As we all know, Georgia Conflict Center is currently working with 3 of our schools, and they support those 3 schools. They also provide the basic restorative practice training. They do ongoing professional learning, with the staff in the school, and of course, they provide school support as needed. Well, IIRP allows us to do the train-the-trainer model, which will allow us to infiltrate our district a little quicker than the work that we're doing with GCC. That's not to say that GCC is not able to do that. That's just not what is happening right now. They also provide the basic RP training, that's restorative practice. There is also ongoing PL, which I provided an overview of what that looks like. District support, they will come in and provide additional training and support for the restorative leadership team. And again, they allow us or help us to create a plan that will allow us to address all tiers of MTSS as we move forward with trying to support our students. All right, I'm sorry, just wanted to make sure I was going in the right direction. So where is CCSD now? As of now, 23 CCSD staff have received the basic restorative discipline training from the International Institute of Restorative Practices. One of the board members, Ms. Hull, also participated in that training, so thank you for your time. We also have submitted dates for the remainder or the remaining staff to be trained with IIRP. Also, pilot schools have been selected to fully implement restorative practices at specific grade levels. Dr. Watley already spoke to the rise in discipline infractions that we have been noticing in specific grade levels. If you pay close attention to one of the documents that I've embedded in the presentation, and I'll show it to you. If you look at those grade levels, 3, 5, 8, 9, and 10, you recognize that some of them are transition grades, right? And so there's a natural change in behavior from students as they're going through those grade levels. Specifically 9th and 10th grade, the last 2 years, they've not been in school due to the pandemic. So they are getting used to being at the high school. They are just basically 2 classes of freshmen, and now we have to train them to be high schoolers. Here's an overview of what IIRP will be offering to Clark County. I don't want to insult your intelligence by reading this to you, but do know that we have 2 in-person trainings that are coming, along with the rest of the basic restorative practice training. Along with that, we'll have 3 days of on-site coaching. So again, it's a hybrid model. Much of it will be online, but the remaining of it will be face-to-face. Just wanted to give you time to look at the current slide that's there. Here are the schools that were selected, to participate in the pilot program for restorative discipline. I know that we have 23, 24 schools. We've only selected 11 because we want to make sure that we are basically being able to measure the impact of restorative discipline on these specific schools as opposed to looking at it district-wide. It is a huge initiative, and so we need to take it a little slow so that we are making sure that where we're putting our time and our talents, that is actually rendering us what we need from it. So again, both of the high schools are listed, and I think we know why that happens. And if you look at the patterns, it's pretty much a feeder pattern. If you think of the grade levels that I mentioned to you before, 3, 5, 8th, 9th, and 10th, that will allow us to continue with the feeder pattern into the schools. So 3rd grade, from the schools that are here, the following year, after next year, we'll begin to train the 4th grade, the 7th grade, and the other grade levels as we are moving or we're matriculating through the year. What would the pilot program look like? Ms. Palmer, do you mind opening up the detailed pilot program. So here's an overview of what the pilot program will look like. It's a lot of talk around restorative practice. What will you be doing? So here it is based, and it's tiered out using MTSS. Every school in the district or that restorative leadership team that have been identified in that school, they will receive the basic training for restorative discipline because, again, it's a set of principles that we want to embed in our culture. So it's not a program, it's not a curricula that we want to use to change behavior. Some practices that we need to embed in our everyday walk in schools. So everyone will get that. At Tier 1, there's been a lot of conversations around what is needed for teachers at the Tier 1 level. Well, we want to provide them with the classroom management, and that is where we will do some work with the behavior specialist. We want to also look at them using effective statements, which is a pretty big part of restorative discipline, setting high expectations for all students. The building relationships piece, that is huge. We want to make sure that we are connecting with our students and understanding what is going on with them so that we can help them repair harm or repair relationships that may have been broken due to an offense. Restorative circles, there's a lot of conversations around circles. Well, there's other things that we can do with circle as it relates to classroom and instruction, so we want to be able to help our teachers understand different ways of implementing that in the classroom. Of course, PBIS is a part of the work. And finally, our trauma-informed strategies. So pilot schools, as well as the schools that have not been selected for the pilot, will be able to receive the Tier 1 coaching strategies there. Tier 2 for restorative practice interventions, there's a list there. The restorative conferences, that is something that we want to begin to implement at those grade levels, so that we can help students be able to articulate what they have done wrong and what they will do to repair it. A restructured day, many of our middle school students spend quite a bit of time in ISS. For what reason? So we want to restructure ISS in those schools so that it is more beneficial to the student. We spend a lot of time making up academic work, which is a good thing, but we also want to spend some time helping them to understand what it is that they have done and how to make it better. Restart Center, as you will notice in the Code of Conduct, not many of our elementary schools have an ISS, and they should not for a number of reasons, but we do want to allow students an opportunity to be able to go and calm down, settle down, be it if you're using some trinkets to help you do that, or if you need to have a conversation with a teacher, a counselor, we want to be able to provide a space in the schools to do that. Gang prevention seminars. This is one that's very dear to my heart. It's no secret that we have a lot going on in our community as well as in our schools. So we want to be able to provide not only our teachers and administrators with information about gangs, but we want to make our parents as well as our board members aware of what's happening in our community and how do we withstand it. What do we need to do to address it? And what do we do to continue to support our students in schools? Drug awareness seminars, we do have our RAP classes that we offer for students who are engaging in illegal drug activities, but we also want to make sure we're doing that at the elementary level. So feedback from students was, we're in high school, we know about drugs. So we need to understand better how to not want to do drugs. But this is something that we want to provide at the elementary level as well because it is starting as early as 3rd grade. And finally, for Tier 3, restorative plans for students. When students are receiving consequences such as suspension, we want them to be able to come back to school and feel welcomed and know that they can restart. We also are looking at Saturday school programs. So in lieu of being suspension, let's come in on a Saturday and let's learn about what do we need to do to repair what it is that we've done, or let's have some different classes to help build our character so that we can be better students. And then the Juvenile Advocate Program, that is where we have some of our students, and I'm specifically speaking to our alternative program, and maybe some of our high school students that have gotten into some trouble with juvenile court, and they're coming to school. Well, we don't want them to feel like they're in jail when they're at school because that's not the case. That's not what school is for. But we do want someone there to advocate on their behalf for them. And so working with that nonprofit program with Ms. Sanders would allow us to assign an advocate to the student to help them, to basically serve as a liaison between the school and the juvenile courts to be able to assist the kids. So that is where we are going. We are looking forward to actually, again, having those trainings completed by the end of June and moving forward with the work of restorative discipline. Now, our code of conduct updates. Dr. Watley mentioned before that we do have a discipline task force that's comprised of school leaders as well as some of our directors that met once a month to review data, talk about some changes that we needed to make to our code, as well as to determine if there was anything that we needed to remove from our code. None of the policies were changed. We simply added some consequences, and then we also made sure that we defined or made it more clear for our parents around bus conduct. So here's an overview of the areas that we looked at: fighting, drug, except alcohol and tobacco, sexual harassment, threat, intimidation, student incivility, and bus conduct. If you look at the discipline data, you'll find that those are the areas or the violations that we had the most infractions in. Number 7, drugs except alcohol and tobacco. We didn't make any changes to the policy, as I stated before. We did add parent notification to the matrix for severity level 1 because we don't want to have a conversation with students about drugs and not make the parent aware of those things. We also wanted to provide a brief explanation of the severity levels and consequences. Oftentimes our parents don't, and our students are not aware of what the levels mean, and we want to make sure that they're not in the dark about any of those things. And we also wanted to offer a minimum and maximum consequence of behavior. Not that that's a guide, that that's what we're going to do, but just so parents will know and understand this is where, here's a continuum of consequences that could be offered for your child. But of course, we want to make sure we have some things in place before we get to that space. Number 8, fighting. We did not make any changes there. We do want to make sure that everyone, including our administrators, understand what a fight is. My understanding of a fight and your understanding of a fight might be 2 different things, which then makes it inconsistent with our consequences. And to ensure that everyone is on the same page, we wanted to provide some clarity. 15, sexual harassment. Again, no changes to that infraction. Provide some examples of unacceptable behaviors, because oftentimes there's some confusion about what is acceptable and what is not when we're talking relationships with young people. The next one is the threat and intimidation. Again, no major changes to this infraction, but we do want to provide examples of what those behaviors are, as well as provide an explanation of the severity levels and consequences. 33, student incivility. This is one that we're working hard to reduce the number of infractions that have been occurring with our students. It is subjective, and it would depend on what's happening. Disrespect to me might be different from you, and so we want to be able to have those conversations with our students as well as with administrators to ensure that we are all on the same accord as it relates to the consequence and or restorative practice approach that we may take. Bus conduct. This was an overhaul for us, not so much of making any changes to the code, but we do want to be clear about what's happening on our bus. And I was unable to extract the number of bus infractions that have occurred, but I can tell you, after having conversations with administrators, as well as having conversations with parents at the board office, that it was there was definitely an increase in the infractions that was taking place before getting on the school bus, while on the bus, and then when they're on their way home. We also wanted to add a glossary of terms to just make sure everyone is on the same accord. We did work with Attorney Pruitt to be able to define those. We are not going to add those this time just because we want to make sure that we are doing what is in the best interest of our community, but that is a space that we're heading in. New language, we also want to add new language referencing expectations for the use of electronic devices, and that has already been added and highlighted in the current code that you have a copy of. That will conclude my presentation, and I am ready to accept any questions you may have.
Okay, go to
Dr. Yeager?
I have a question about the scale, because I know one of the arguments for using the international program was the scale, that they could handle it. It still looks like we're still doing 20 people at a time. Am I understanding that correctly? Because how many teachers do we have in the district? Are we not going to train them all eventually? That was the scale argument, I thought, for not using the conflict center. And it looks like you're just doing 20 more people, bringing it in piloting program.
So what we're doing actually, Dr. Yeager, is training 20 of our current staff members to be able to train the staff. And so if we have a restorative leadership team in each school, we can then train our staff during that time. So it's not 20 per training, it's one of those 20 team members going out to train that staff.
Okay, that wasn't clear, I'm sorry, so I'll have to go back and look at it again.
Okay.
And I want to go back to something I mentioned last year, is that we, in an effort for this to be really embedded in the culture, it's really important that everyone embodies the work. It cannot just be attached to a person. It can't be, and I'm going to use myself as an example. Restorative Practices is not a Jillian program. This is a us, we, CCSD community type of way that we're living. And so we've got to embed it within our culture enough where people within our schools can go and then train new teachers to be ambassadors for the work, train students to be ambassadors for the work. And that's how you really start to embed that work into the culture.
So I completely agree with you, and
Yeah.
I get that. I don't see that, sorry, I don't see that in here, in this presentation. How is that happening? How is that transmission of information happening? I see 2 in-person training of trainer events for 20 members.
Okay.
That doesn't sound like everybody's going to be on board.
So that is the team that's going to train the remainder of our staff members, right? And so the way that I have tried to explain it.
Can I ask, so you're going to, if I understand, the 20 people are going into each school?
That is
And
correct.
those people are going to train the entire staff of a school?
That is correct. So the way that I've tried to explain it is to say that I am the Danny Malik for Clark County School District. So Danny, along with a team of his people, go into a school and they train the staff to be able to implement restorative practices. I am Utevia. I will have a team of 20 people. We will go in and train a staff to be able to implement restorative practices within their school. If there are any questions, we don't have to call on a different entity to come in to address those issues or to support the school, because we have it as a part of our district support. So I am the district support for that. So instead of calling GCC or IIRP to come in and support schools with restorative practice, I am trained to be able to do that along with the team, and we will be able to support our district as a whole.
Is there a time limit that you all have? Like one going from you all to the 20 people that will be trained, and then a schedule of how that is then being rolled out into the schools? And second, is this mandatory? I probably got that same question for a couple of things you all said today, because I keep hearing the words intentional, and you know that this is part of our culture, but I want to know, is this mandatory for everyone? And how does that translate from the academic side? I know Mr. Gaston, I want to call you, but life, I want to talk to you about that. And then also to you all side, I don't want the bridge, if that makes sense.
It does, yes, ma'am. So IRRP will work with our team to develop an implementation plan for our district. So there will be a timeline, and there is a process that we will use to ensure that everyone gets trained in the time that we need for them to be trained so that we can implement it district-wide. That's why we're starting with that pilot program. This is a district initiative, so yes, it will be mandatory that everyone use those practices specifically at Tier 1, and then as time roll out, we'll be able to move those Tier 2 and Tier 3 practices into every school.
So I only have 3 questions. Karina has about 7. All right, so my first question would be, what is the plan to make sure that the school resource officers are included in restorative discipline practices?
They will be asked to participate in the training as well. Recently, we did have a gang seminar training where many of our SROs, along with our chief, participated in that. And we worked with the sheriff department to be able to do that work. But they will be asked to participate in that, as they will play a major role in the work that we're doing with that.
And just following up, is that a polite ask, or is that a requirement your contract will not be renewed if you don't do it, kind of?
Well, what I have worked, and Chief Reed and I have worked really closely, is to make sure student support services and the work of the SROs are aligned. Okay. And so even with the threat assessment protocol, that was not designed in isolation. That was designed in tandem with student support services and SROs. We attended the training together. And I think that relationship matters. You know, even when Chief comes up and present, we try to work on those safety and security things from a lens of trauma-informed, a lens of restorative practices, a lens of PBIS. And so my team, as well as the Chief's team, has been doing a lot of cross-collaboration training this year, and we will continue to do that work. And so I don't want to say mandatory, but the relationship is established, and so it's a natural flow, and we've been producing great product and work as it relates to that, safety and security.
Stay right there.
Yes, ma'am.
For number 7, when looking at the substance abuse or the drugs minus the alcohol and tobacco, are we having any type of services to assess the students' mental health to see what could be stemming or causing that drug use? Has that been rolled in?
We have a partnership with UGA, and we're rolling it out next year through the social work department. We are in a pilot program to use a substance abuse protocol. We partnered with the counseling service at UGA, and so we got a grant for that. And yes, we will be using that substance abuse protocol for that very reason.
Just 2 more, Karina.
Okay.
And looking at student incivility, are we rolling any type of cultural competency learning opportunities in with teachers to address, since that's so subjective?
Absolutely. A huge piece around discipline, around any of the work we do, is how we show up. I'll say that again, it's how we show up. We all come from our different backgrounds, and so therein lies when I see, for example, the example you used earlier with respect. I may see disrespect differently than another person based on our life experiences. So one thing that my team with the trauma-informed specialists we're working on is bringing in folks who are skilled in the work around helping our staff, our teachers, our administrators, our leaders, to be able to unpack some of the stuff that they bring to decision-making in a very safe space. So we are working with a group right now to roll out a series of trainings around that work. It's not personal, but it's necessary.
If I could add, Dr. Watley, we had a training that Dr. Watley planned for us last school year around cultural competency. We trained all of our social workers, counselors, somebody else, behavior specialist. There was a
Entire
large
group.
So they could identify when that is happening or not happening at their schools. So giving them the skills to be able to address that with those individual teachers because they have those relationships, or if it was pervasive, to address it with their principal as well as bring it to Dr. Watley for an action plan.
Thank you. And my last question would be, I know that you just talked about the threat assessment and how important that training was and them coming back. And I don't know if I'm speaking for my colleagues, but would you be presenting a policy for the board to review around threat assessment, so that process, that procedure, but also the policy governing that procedure is transparent and clear?
Right now, we have a protocol that's been established, and we will be sharing that with leaders next week in summer leadership. We are also working on the training that's going to continue, and if that's the will of the board, we can definitely write it in a policy.
I appreciate both of you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Gallagher?
Okay, so mine's about the restorative discipline pilot program, and then I'll go through the rest of the slides. So my first one, so on tier 1, you have listed classroom management. So I'm wondering how that will be evaluated. We have a lot of classrooms. So if you're providing tools and skills, how is what teachers are taught being evaluated? Do we have benchmarks for students, and who holds them accountable?
The teachers?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
For the training that's provided in Tier 1?
So classroom management is not just a Dr. Watley and Utivia
Okay.
situation. That's a district, that's instruction, that's superintendent. We all share training our teachers to be able to do that work. I know from being a former administrator that TEACS holds them accountable for ensuring that that happens, but we will also do what we call climate walkthroughs, where we will take a look and see as to, we will measure their use of effective classroom management behaviors. Our behavior specialist also uses a tool where they are able to go in and observe what's happening in classrooms so that they could better support teachers in their practices.
If I could add, Ms. Gallagher, I met with members of Dr. Blankenship's team today around induction. So part of the training that we will provide for new teachers, and we have about 50% of our, is that right? About 50%? Which are their first 5 years of teaching. So our induction program specifically focuses on Tier 1 classroom management. So we've identified specific strategies that we would expect all of our teachers to implement as we plan what we call instructional rounds and climate walks with our principals that are part of their PLCs, as well as our assistant principals. We will be collecting data to see, are those the behaviors that we see? And we also talk, because some schools who have implemented these for several years, their schools are running fine, right? And then we do have some schools that it is inconsistent. Then our follow-up will be around their school improvement plans and really helping them create specific actions where we would expect to see every teacher implementing these basic Tier 1 behavior strategies. And we've created metrics for that, and then we would expect to see some of the discipline infractions such as incivility, which is often a direct correlated to when there is poor classroom management going on in the classroom, that we would see that decrease as we would see the behaviors that we would expect teachers to implement increase.
How you know my follow-up question was? Okay, but I do have one more follow-up to that one. So who defines what is effective?
I'm going to say research defines that.
Okay.
That would depend on what research is saying around that and what we are seeing that's actually working in our district. Again, we serve a very unique population of students. What may work in one county may not work in our county. And so we'll have to tweak that. That will come with some of our culturally relevant teaching that we will need to do, which they were speaking, but I also wanted to add that that is included or a part of restorative discipline as well. You have to talk about your own biases and who you are as you're beginning to try to identify how to help someone else. So again, I'll go back to research.
Okay, and I do just want to voice a concern that I have about that, because we do it a lot in Clark County. So we'll say, you know, we have a unique and diverse population, and every school is different, and then so we get lost in the weeds and not be able to get anything done because we don't have one standard expectation. So, okay, so my second one is the Tier 2 part. You mentioned seminars. Who's the target audience?
So that would depend on what we are looking at. So if we're looking at games, it's going to be our students that have been identified as being affiliated with a gang through law enforcement or different situations that have occurred in the school. It would also be for our students who have been a part or who have participated in some of our most violent offenses, and that would be for them as well as their parents, so we can ensure that we are capturing both audiences.
So not the community at large.
So I have spoken, with Terrace Thomas to be able to have some conversations with our neighborhood leaders around restorative discipline, as well as around the gang prevention seminar, and we are working now to see how we can have that happen before school begins.
Okay. And then under Tier 3, that one, restorative plans. So who's responsible for maintenance of those plans?
That would be part of the work of the restorative leadership team. So they will have a leader in their building that would do that work. As the director of restorative discipline, I will also follow up on those plans.
So are those people teachers?
Some of them will be teachers.
So putting more work on teachers.
So that's a part of the work. If you're looking at tier 1 strategies, you're able to identify if we have a student in the classroom that have an issue or have a situation that we need to address.
Okay.
So at tier 1, you're able to identify something's not working here. Let's create a different plan for the student that can typically take place in the classroom, be it if that's a check-in, check-out, or just a little extra time with the teacher. When we get to tier 3, we will then begin to bring in some behavior specialists, your restorative discipline trainer, leader, coordinator, counselors will begin to do that work, but that work will start, the foundation of the work starts with the teacher because they have the best relationship with that child, but we'll be responsible for it,
Those
overseeing
restorative
it.
plans. For the restorative plan?
Yes.
So there's not like an IEP plan?
No.
Okay.
And that should not be new to our teachers. When our MTSS framework, we usually focus on academics. And so our teachers already implement plans when students are at tier 2 and tier 3, when they are experiencing a gap in academics. We inconsistently do that with behavior. So yes, the teacher will be responsible for overseeing that, but when they get to tier 3, it is a team. We're not asking teachers to, you tried all these things, now think of something different, because if they knew something different, they would do it. So it is the team that is helping figure out the intervention. It's really the teacher saying, I've implemented this for 2 or 3 weeks, it's not working, or I implemented it for 2 or 3 weeks and it sort of works, let me tell you what I did. And that team of behavior specialists, lead teachers, counselors are saying, okay, Ms. Johnson tried this, let's revise what she is doing, and then the teacher updates that plan.
Okay. But just for clarity, because you mentioned behavior specialists are not in your department?
No, they are not, no.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay, so, you mentioned Ms. Sanders, the juvenile advocate. I love Jalita. So, and this may not be for y'all, this may be, so is the district financially supporting the program like we do with GCC?
Good question. I just actually submitted a proposal to Ms. Jackson, Veronica Jackson, to look over for me so that we can begin to have a conversation around what a contract will look like or need to look like for the program. It is my goal to support the program, as that team does a lot of work already with many of our students. And so if we're going to ask that those services be a part of the work that we do, we definitely want to be able to compensate and provide funding for that.
And then I have a question about the code of conduct. So I've always gotten code of conduct at a Title I meeting when we go in and meet the teachers, but no one explained to me what the code of conduct is and how to read through that book and how to navigate or advocate for my child when something does come up. Will y'all be doing something like that for parents?
Can I speak to that? We are going to be very intentional next year around making sure parents have knowledge around the student code of conduct. So one thing we're working with the Office of Family Engagement under Dr. Felgenhauer, we're going to roll out a series of student services trainings through that department with family engagement and community. And one topic will be the student code of conduct, because what I don't want to happen is this to become a dusty book that sits on somebody's shelf. And the only way you can really empower and make change is that if the principal knows it, the teachers knows it, the parents know it, and the children know it. Everybody needs to have an understanding of that student code of conduct. And so that's one of our priorities for next year. We're meeting with Dr. Felgenhauer to see how student support services can roll out a series of trainings, not just on student code of conduct, but it's going to be a variety of trainings for the community, for parents, so that we can empower them and make sure that they know their rights and make sure they understand how we do business in school.
My last one, for number 17, threat and intimidation. I think that is also subjective. Will there be any additional training for all staff, not just teachers, around cultural competency and what threats and intimidation looks like based on where somebody comes from?
We are working on those types of trainings as we speak, and I will be bringing that forth to the board and to cabinet around some of the trainings that we're working on rolling out. So for example, one is around cultural competency, but we've got to make sure we scaffold that and make sure that teachers are getting that, not only teachers, but principals, we as district staff. I think sometimes, in all honesty, people have blind spots and you just don't know you have them. That does not make you a bad person, but it can bring about unintended consequences for our children. And so we have to make sure that we create spaces for that, where we can have honest and true conversations in certain spaces without criticism, without making people feel bad, but using it as an opportunity for growth and doing what's better for our community and for our children.
All right, I'm gonna sort of pivot to Ms. Davis, Dr. Dykeman, and Dr. Maddox to see if you all have any questions.
Thank you. Quick question. I heard training. And I'm curious, again, what are the innovative things that you're doing to actually execute on this? This is a lot of time spent to do this training and for people to actually participate in the training. How successful what are you looking at in terms of a timeline for trying to make sure that we at least hit those critical grades that you talked about earlier and getting this built into their schedule for next year early?
Thanks to Mr. Gaskins and his team, I will be working with our principal supervisors in the leadership retreat next week, to be able to, or to begin that work with the principals so that they will understand the plan and we can begin to actually map that out and what it will look like for each school that is a part of that, as well as working with our principals as at the beginning of the year when they are going over the code of conduct with staff, when they are speaking to students. I would like to be a part of those conversations so that we're sure that everyone has received the same information and there's no inconsistent thoughts or practices that we would have to deal with later.
So I'm kind of here on that space with, we have Georgia Conflict Center as well as RTTI. And I know we've had Georgia Conflict Center for a while now, and so we have some results from what they're doing. Do we have any results yet, or is RTTI too new to this to actually see any benefit from them being here?
I think it's too. In my opinion, it's too premature. We've only had 20 staff trained, and so I think next year we'll be able to kind of gauge whether or not it's effective and do a comparison to GCC and what's happening in schools. But right now, I think it's too premature.
And I'll end with this. It seems like I remember a high transient rate in our school system with kids going from one school to another school because I'm with somebody this week and somebody else. Are we looking at bridging that inconsistency in terms of maybe what one group is receiving versus the other group?
Yes, ma'am. That is why we'll do that basic restorative practice training for all of our schools so that they have a basic understanding of what those practices are and what needs to be embedded within the culture so that those practices will be the same.
All 21 schools get that basic?
Yes, yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you. Dr. Dykeman and Dr. Maddox.
Okay. Just going back to that, all 21 schools will get the basic, and then how soon will it be rolled out? You know, how long does the pilot work for that first group? I guess I still feel some kind of way with like the discipline and things like that when we are choosing the schools, and I know you have good reasons for doing that, but you know, when we're talking about gangs and the things that are happening now, you know, when I look at the way rural schools on either end, and I don't see them in any pilots that we have coming up, I continuously not see those schools. You know, so I want to know when are they going to get to level 2, you know, and then moving on. Would there be a schedule for that as well, like for that particular rollout?
Yes, ma'am. That will all be a part of that implementation plan that the International Institute of Restorative Practice will help our team develop for the district. Now, all of our schools will have access to that information. So if one of those schools' principals call and say, hey, Dr. Tolbert, do you mind if we participate in this specific training or seminar? I will always say yes. I would never say no. And then we can begin that work as well.
And if I could add, all of our schools are expected to implement PBIS, which is a Tier 1 strategy, which is the positive behaviors, interventions, and supports. Thank you. And so we have all schools trained in PBIS this year. The other thing is that all of our schools in their school improvement plan, they are responsible for a school climate goal. So we ask them to identify with some schools it's pervasive. As Dr. Tolbert and Dr. Watley said, it might be 4th and 5th grade, it might be all grades, it might be boys, it might be girls, it might be a certain population. We look at their discipline data, I'm specifically now talking about those schools that are not in the pilot, and they are responsible for creating a plan for that group. And that plan that they create may actually be some of the strategies in Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3. So for example, I'm thinking of one of your rural schools that you mentioned. They might do a check-in, check-out strategy, which is part of the training that is provided for a specific group of students. So it is very much aligned to some of the work that we have started. I think the biggest challenge that we have, being very transparent, is the consistency of implementation and setting the expectation that everyone will do it. Because sometimes it is, like when a kid can't read, we teach them how to read, right? But when a kid has a behavior that might not be acceptable for a school, we have to teach them what behaviors are acceptable and work with them through that and not just suspend them, right? And so I think that is our challenge, that is our gap that we're trying to address. Some of that has already been addressed. Some schools have been more successful than others, and I think that this will bring everybody on the same page.
Okay, yeah, that's my other concern is what Ms. Davis spoke to is, you know, we have students, because I know because I deal with a lot of them, and I want to go, I don't want to be at this school, I want to be at that school because I'm safer at that school. And, you know, and there have been several, like more than 3 instances this school year, this latter half, that I am very concerned about. When it comes to, in one instance, I mean, it's out there on the World Wide Web. It's, you know, it's publicized. It's a whole video. And you can just look at it and see, one, the teacher obviously has not even, one, been trained or was scared or something happened when this fight broke out and they walked right past the students. Like, that is just unacceptable, you know? And so I wonder, okay, if she's feeling that and didn't even call for SRO or a principal, it was enough time in the video for you to see if they called for somebody. And so if she wasn't there, panicked and didn't know what to do, that could have gone way bad. Where is the accountability? And I guess that's why I'm always constantly concerned about, I'm always up in your business, Dr. Watley, about your role, you know, her role, but it's a joint role between Mr. Gaston and Dr. Watley, from what I'm understanding. And I guess I want to see that crosswalk. Like when something happens in the classroom, what happens next? How soon does it get to this side of the table, which a lot of times I was thinking, I put it all on this side of the table, not truly understanding that. And I'm sure parents don't understand it as well, because we're all looking for the person who's responsible for the discipline. So I think having a very transparent understanding for the public of this is what happens when, you know, something happens. I don't care what we may fight, whatever it might be. This bullying is way out of control. And, you know, and I see like number 17, number 8 fighting, but bullying by itself. Like, I don't see recommendations for that, and I'm very passionate about that. We got these big old signs in these schools saying how we don't tolerate bullying, but yet there's something that's not happening because the bullying is going on. And it's very concrete facts about how it's not the same, it's not handled the same from one school to the next, which goes back to, I want to transfer tomorrow, I don't want to be in the school. All 21 of our schools should be safe. It should not be, I'm going to go to this school because it's a better school. No, all our schools should be the better school. And I said, so I'm just really want us to find that consistency, even in some of the recommendations. I believe it has to be very specific and not subjective, just like you said, because there are some blind spots. All of us got them, But I want to see more of that consistency in the schools next year.
Thank you, Dr. Maddox. We do have a separate subcommittee of members it's called an SCL committee, where we're working with the counselor, the director of social work, myself, and we're coming up with a flow chart, the behavior specialist. We're coming up with developing a flow chart of school-based behaviors that need to be handled and how do we handle them there, and what incidents needs to be referred for a different consequence, be it if it's to Dr. Watley, Mr. Gaskins, at which time they will disseminate those incidents to the people that it needs to go to. So we are in the process of developing a protocol and some procedures and flow charts to address that. As far as bullying and being able to address those situations, that's a lack of training, to be transparent. So ensuring that all of our administrators are trained on our bullying policy, knowing what it is and knowing how to follow through on that. But also it comes back to recognizing that some incidences may not be bullying, and how do we teach our children what that is and what do that look like. So that training is the basis of the work that needs to be done there.
And one last thing, I like, the idea of the alternative ways, the innovation, like with the Saturday program where students can learn more about that, but where are the parents in this? Because we keep talking about in the district community schools, and I guess I don't see it until all these parts are brought together. Because we are very broken as a community, not just here, a lot of places. So how do we bring these parts together in terms of the parents and also helping them to understand? So, if we have students with repeat issues, that might be a counseling issue because there are some other things going on in the background at home, or so how do we really help the whole child if we just bringing just that child in for Saturday school and not not really holding the parent accountable? I guess that sounds harsh, but at the same time, when does the parent also have to be a part of this behavior and be at the table and also receive some tools on also how to help their children? Because they also have to have some skin in the game. If, otherwise it's just a revolving cycle of what we have now.
Yes, and so to that end, Dr. Maddox, myself and Dr. Felgenheier and my team have been working on the parent piece. And that's a part of our summer work, is to work on how we're going to engage parents better. Parenting classes. This past year, we had parenting classes, and we had a low number of parents to show up. Well, what do we need to do to change that and make that better? We can have a vehicle for parents to learn, but we need to sometimes go where they are. So looking at how we can revisit that and be innovative with those things. So that's in the works. My team, as well as Lawrence Harris's team, is collaborating on that work. We've also brought Ms. Felgenheier into the SEL committee because that's the parent piece that we're missing. And so in all transparency, we do need to engage our parents better. We need to bring them, into the fold and into the decision-making table about their children. And so I agree with that, and that's something that's front and center and is a high priority for me this year.
I would also like to add the work with the neighborhood leaders is important with this, right? Because when you are in the community and you're engaged and you're doing that work, it's easier for you to be able to communicate with the parent and be able to help them become better advocates for their students. So, and as harsh as this may sound, not many of our parents trust the work that we do when it comes to discipline with their kids. And so when we are working with those neighborhood leaders and training them on what we are doing in the school with restorative discipline, with discipline in general, restorative practices and discipline in general, then they are better able to help that parent either understand what it is we're doing or serve as an advocate for them when they're coming in to have those discussions with school administrators and leaders around those consequences and needs for their child. Yes, ma'am.
I just had a few follow-up questions and wanted to sort of build on what has been asked, but there may be some opportunities for collaboration because each of us represent different districts. And so as we, meet with our even small groups of parents, small groups of stakeholders and things like that, discipline is something that's on everybody's mind. So I know you all know that. It's the thing that binds us all together. And so, just sort of putting that, registering that for the record, that there could be certainly some opportunities over the next year with stakeholders, so certainly our neighborhood leaders, but then also as board members can be, advocates of some sort. I know we don't always have all of the information, but we do have a good bit of the data. And so that sort of leads me to my next question about behavior data. I know that in our school charts, we have updated information, and I'm very grateful for that, for having that in there. And we don't have 2022 yet, but I do know that we can look at it, we could break it down by a few different areas, race, disability, a lot of different subgroups. My question is, with these particular areas, like inside of the school charts, and this may be more for you, like it has in there like the resolution. So like if it's in school suspension, if it's out of school, if it's suspension from the bus, or if a physical restraint was applied. Is there any way to have like these categories? I know that we know categories and we have access to that, or you all do as a district, but how do we know, for instance, when we're talking about like incivility or when we're talking about fighting, how does a board member know how to either represent that to the public, to point people where they can find that information, and even to be able to answer our own questions about effectiveness, because that is measured, in different ways in the literature. So we may want to be able to go and say, hey, yeah, these are, 10 schools that are rolling out their train the trainer for restorative practices, and we can go and look at the data from, 2020, and then this year, because I know we skipped a year. Yeah. Is it a possibility to have that in our school charts, or is that without messing up what we already have?
There is, and I will follow up with Mr. Barlaman.
It's actually there, Mr. Gaskins.
Okay.
So when we go
Okay.
into that Zoho analytics program, if you go and there's a drop-down menu that will allow you to look at the different resolutions and solutions and those different categories, and it will define it according to race, students with disabilities, and it'll tell you what we did to address those different incidents.
Okay, can you
I'll
show me that?
I
Okay,
will.
because
I'll
I
show
can
it to
see
you.
by school and I can see by other subgroups, I just can't see by the category, and I
I'll
think
show
that
it to
has
you.
implications for some of the things that
Yes, ma'am.
you all were talking about.
And if I could add, of course, our own internal dashboard is important. I think there is some also training that the state provides, a dashboard as well that shows us data over multiple years. It shows not just discipline, but attendance, teacher attendance, student attendance. It shows drug use, guns, violence, and it also helps compare our schools to schools in our district and other schools around the state.
Is it a forward-facing, like one that
It's
we
forward.
have it?
Mhm.
Okay,
The whole community has access to it.
Okay.
So I think that Dr. Tolbert can show, or we can have some time to train the board around our internal dashboard, but I would also say that what is being shared with our community publicly across the state is equally as important, that we show you all how to use that as well.
okay. I think that would be great, because I think that gives us a measure of not what's effective necessarily, because I know it's not just about frequencies, which is what's here, but it does give us a little measure of like what's happening, for instance, at the schools that are piloted and the ones that aren't, or what's happening with GCC versus, and not versus, but because those schools will have that as well. Yeah. Just two more quick questions. One of the things, you mentioned that, that you all, the district will have an implementation plan that will have the dates. What do you anticipate the date, like with the train the trainer, we're almost there with the 20, but the capacity really is in the schools. So when do you anticipate like our first training for school personnel being?
I'm actually a trainer, and so there are several schools I've already gone into and provided that basic training. But as
Okay.
far as IIRP goes, we are looking to have our team trained by the end of September, at which time we will then begin to do the work of getting into schools.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is, I have more questions, but I know we'll chit chat.
Yes,
But in one of the slides, that team of 20, like the trainers, I think I saw behavior specialists in that.
You did.
And from my understanding of the groups that were listed, historically, behavior specialists have had we've had clinical capacity, just like all of the other people on that team. So from social workers to psychologists. That's no longer the case based on what I've seen over the past couple of years with the job descriptions. And so I guess my question is, does that limit the team in some way? I sort of see that team as being able, the whole team, the restorative practice team, as needing to be able to be dispatched to talk about climate issues, to provide professional development, to go in a classroom if they need to do classroom management modeling, to do a classroom assessment, if they need to pull back and provide some tier 2 and 3 support, to be able to do that. But as you go up the tiers, that is more counseling, or it is a little bit more clinically based often. And so my question is, I guess, how do the behavior specialists fit in there?
So our behavior specialists we've been collaborating together, right? And so I may go in and do some restorative practice training. They will then come in and do some more specific training and skill building around functional behavior analysis or behavior intervention plans, or building a specific plan for a teacher to be able to support her in that classroom. So there have been some work around that, but there is work to be done that we need to continue to do to build not only their skill set, my skill set, and the skill set of others in our district.
And I don't want to put Dr. Blankenship on the spot, but I think there are some of our behavior specialists that have the clinical certification or the BCBA. And so we've had some internal conversations between our 3 departments about how do we incentivize those that don't have that certification to get that certification so they can provide more of that expertise as we support teachers and leaders and students.
Yeah, and I know like with the BCBA, so I think that's great. I think 2 years ago, we may have even had or 3 years, maybe a more structured pipeline, I think, for some support and development and education with the BCBA. I guess I'm thinking even a little bit underneath that, like, right, with clinical work. Their potential to be able to serve on a restorative, I mean, they are like critical as we talk about discipline, but there's a piece that is lacking, you know, from a clinical standpoint. And I want to be sure that, well, ideally it would not be lacking, but because that is what it is right now, I want to be sure that as they're a part of these teams, the goal is to build capacity in schools as we do train the trainer models, then that they are in a position, you know,
Yes.
to do that.
So what I will say, and I think that Dr. Watley or maybe Dr. Tolbert alluded to this, is that one of the activities we started at our cabinet retreat is to identify everyone that is supporting culture and climate. Some individuals are replicating work, and then there's work that's not being done because no one does that work, right? Because is it the counselor, is it the behavior specialist, is it the psychologist? And so we have not finished that work. That work is in progress, but it's to your point, what are we missing? It may be that clinical counseling that you just alluded to, and then where does that live? So does that live with the behavior specialist? And if that does live with the behavior specialist, how do we assess that current department? How do we train them up? How do we create internal training? How do we have external training to identify that group? And because we have been a district that has really supported SEL with our trauma-informed specialists, our counselors, our psychologists, sometimes when we've added people, we've not said, this is no longer your work, because now we have someone that is specialized in this work. So you may want to go to one school and everybody's kind of doing the same thing, but this is not happening. Or you go to this school and they have a great model, but they've created their model and there hasn't been a district expectation set. So it took us a while in that conversation to identify all of the different positions that we have to support SEL and climate and culture in our buildings. And now we're talking about what are the gaps, and do we need to revise job descriptions and think about departments and divisions and where they report to and who they report to make sure that we're providing the best support for our students first, but then training their teachers and their leaders to lead that.
Thank you. Those are all my questions. Let me go back to the, Dr. Anderson.
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute. Yes.
You have any questions?
Can you all hear me? No. You all covered it all. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other, did I miss someone?
I'm going
Okay.
to save that for one of those private meetings. I need one of those real bad.
Okay. Dr. Yeager?
I was just going to note, I've been looking at the data that you provided us. Thank you for that. In terms of total behavior incidents this year versus pre-pandemic, we're actually quite below what we were 3 years ago. I didn't realize that. I know everybody's really, really upset and worried about discipline right now, but can you explain or put some background behind that? Are the incidents worse than they were before? There's just fewer of them, or what's happening right now compared to pre-pandemic?
Our building leaders are doing a really good job of attending to those incidents within the building. And so they are trained to be able to handle those situations without necessarily suspending a kid or placing a kid in ISSS. There have been a lot of services that have been provided to them, be it our behavior specialists, our school counselors, our school social workers have increased their efforts in our building in ensuring that we're providing different services for our students. Many of our principals will continue to say that there are approximately 3% of our students that are responsible for those incidents. And so we forget the other 97% of our students that are really doing well and that are behaving. So the incidents that we hear about a lot, yes, they are serious incidents, and we definitely do need to do a better job of addressing those incidents. But for the most part, the systems in our school district are solid when it comes to addressing students' discipline.
Can I say something as well? Sure. Last year, we rolled out that case management consultation system process through social work, and what we found is that has really helped for our students who are what we consider to be our high flyers, those that have high recidivism rate, for us to catch them early so that we put interventions day one when they return to our general population or school, or they return from restrictive placements. That has really helped to shore up, and that's where that team comes together and really is a think tank around providing interventions for those students day one. And we're looking at expanding that model to other, behaviors in the school as well, not just students coming from DJJ and other areas.
We've also done a really good job of working together. And so when there's a situation that occurs in the building, principals do not hesitate to contact myself or Dr. Watley to ask a question around what's next. What can we do for this student? What are some things that you all can offer? Let's sit down at the table and come together. Does this even need to go to a hearing? And so there's been a lot of work around that work as well, which has also resulted in the number of, I'll say, subjective infractions coming to a hearing or being recorded in our discipline, as a part of our discipline, excuse me.
And yet, our teachers are reporting feeling more afraid, and some other kids are reporting feeling more afraid. So What's shifted in the,
So what we are seeing in our schools are a direct manifestation of what's happening in our communities. So after participating in the gang seminar a couple of weeks ago, one of the sheriffs, communicated that there had been, at that time, 72 shootings in Athens that involved juveniles from January until, that was a couple of weeks ago, right? From those 72 shootings, they had, I think they found like 409 shell casings. Those things then begin to manifest themselves in the building because that's a meeting place for our students, and they're coming together. And yes, I can understand why we have some students that are afraid of what's happening because they see it in the community. Our teachers are seeing it happen, and when you are watching your students go to jail or get killed daily in our community, yes, I could definitely understand why they are feeling that way. After participating in a hearing yesterday, I watched one of our students engage in some behaviors that I was floored by, and that was in the courtroom. So, of course, coming back to work, I'm thinking to myself, what is it that we need to do to teach our students how not to behave this way? What are some other supports we can put in place so that this won't happen? How do we help him not behave this way in front of adults and create that fear or that intimidation for the adult? At this point, it's hard to know sometimes how our students will react depending on what the incident is. Very complicated matter, I would say.
I know we're trying to move on, right? And I'd like for us to move on, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say that the 2 or 3 people that do call me about discipline issues in the schools are still calling me about those issues. And I've said to them, go to your building leader and bring this to them. I can't bring it for you. You need to bring it, but I'll be alert to what's going on. I've heard some things that cause me concern in terms of the communication. I know that you guys are working hard to work together and get things better communicated, but I also heard some things that, some replication, and yet there's some things that are not being done. And so what is the one thing that would bring it to a place of high priority that we eliminate the replication and make sure that we close the gaps of what we actually need to do in the district? I'm not asking you to answer that now, but that will be my question that I will write down and send in, because I will want to see that answer at some point, because I think that's critical. And I think it's frightening to think that we have unmet needs, and yet we have a number of people doing the same things. And so, yeah, that's a concern. But thank you guys, you're doing a phenomenal job, I can tell you that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And also, if you can think of, I think the board stands ready to support. I know part of this is strategy and nothing happens overnight, but there may be also some low-hanging things that our building principals need, or what, because like Ms. Davis, that's primarily what I hear, particularly from the high schools, not necessarily from the principals. Sometimes it's people in the schools. About that 3%, like the few. And so, as you think of if there are any sort of interim things, and I know that they don't replace the long-term strategy, that the board can be supportive of from a budgeting standpoint, I'm sure that, the board would be open to listening, to those things.
Thank you all so much for your support. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So we are going to move forward to, I think that was it on our presentations and discussions. Am I overlooking something? Okay. We're going to go to item 11, and these are our policies for review by the board. And we'll start with did you say Dr. Harris was? Okay, all right. And so I'm just we have these listed before us, the policy JCDA, the policy JCDAE, and then I think we pulled number 3, which was policy IFBG, and so then that leaves policy BBA for board officers and policy BAC for equity. And so before I open the floor for discussion, Dr. Harris, are there any updates or is there an overview that you would like to provide?
Yes, Dr. Gann, good evening, everyone. So there are no changes to policy JCDA. That is the Student Code of Conduct policy. Per policy, JCDE is the exhibit, which is the Student Code of Conduct. That is the document that Dr. Watley and Dr. Tolbert were just referencing. That is where you will see the changes that have been made to the student code. With them there, they should be able to talk through those. And then policy BBA and BAC have been revised. BBA was done in collaboration with Dr. Anderson and Attorney Hull, and BAC was submitted by Attorney Hull for consideration as a new policy that covers equity. So that is an overview of those four.
Okay, thank you. So let's, I guess we'll go through each of these board colleagues for policy JCDA and JCDAE. Are there any thoughts, comments? Dr. Yeager.
So I don't see anywhere in Assembly the legal comments about these policy changes. Have we stopped doing that? There's no legal, have you seen these? Have you commented on them?
I have seen these. They were sort of evolving all the way through till this morning, so
Okay.
it
So
never
you
got.
haven't been given enough time to comment on them?
Well, I mean, I met with Dr. Harris 2 or 3 weeks ago, I guess, but then that led to more changes and then changes and changes. So, you know, rather than legal comments, I would like to think what you have now is probably the finished product after my input.
Okay. I'm particularly curious about the equity policy, which is brand new and written by our legal member of the board. So I imagine, but I just wondered if there were any legal issues potentially related to some of the policies around this.
A lot of it is just restatements of you know, non-discrimination things that may appear in other parts of the policy. The one thing that, and again, evolving up until this morning, so I just pointed that out to Ms. Hull this morning. There's one sentence about single-sex classrooms.
Okay, so that was what my question was.
That was your question, okay. And I think that one may bear a little refining. But of course, these are just going out for public comment, so that gives us time to do that.
Okay, that's the one that was my red flag. I wondered if you'd seen that. So, okay. So
I
you
did
have
see that,
remarked on that, and
yeah, basically the oddly to my mind, OCR is more accepting of single-sex schools than single-sex classrooms, although even the latter have some circumstances where they say that it can be justified. So again, it's not that it necessarily needs to come out, but probably needs some refining.
Okay, thank you.
Others?
I particularly like that policy.
Are we just commenting on any of these?
Yes, any of the ones that were, just for the ones that were for review by the board.
Okay.
Under 11. So any others about? Oh, go ahead, Dr. Anderson.
Dr. Gann, I don't know if you remember, but when you and I met and discussed, we went over some of the conversations that we had had that the board members had had in the past. And one of those was, I believe it was Attorney Hall asking about us addressing facilities, equity in facilities in a specific policy. And I don't know if this specific equity policy, policy BAC, it does include that language of equity in facilities. And so I wanted to kind of bring that back to the board to see if that addressed that board member's concerns about us not having a specific policy related to equity of facilities. Or if we wanted to add more policies to address facilities specifically.
And you're speaking specifically under point C, where it says the superintendent shall review current and proposed programs, activities, and facilities, Dr. Anderson?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm just wanting to make sure that if this policy does get approved, that we're not then having another conversation about a policy addressing equity in facilities if this one already addresses facilities. Or perhaps maybe Attorney Hall can elaborate on what specific other language she wanted in policies that talk about equity in facilities.
I actually
Hopefully
like
I'm making sense.
I would open the floor and invite any colleagues or any cabinet members to add additional language. I think that if this is adopted, that will cover my concern with the facilities, because it would address it through this policy and make the superintendent accountable for making sure that all the facilities were equitable. But thank you so much for bringing that back around.
So can I add to that? Because we did have some internal conversations around this policy and making sure that what was expected and required of the superintendent was realistic and that they were able to do. And so in some situations, the superintendent oversees that work. In some situations, there may be an expectation that she is the one or he is the one that does that work. And so we just wanted to make sure, and I can use textbooks as an example because that's my area of expertise sometimes, is that our question was around the level of expertise that some of our textbooks, so like if we were adopting a physics textbook, would we want the superintendent to review that physics textbook, or would we want her to ensure that there was a process of that review that was equitable and then took that recommendation? So we just wanted to be really sure of the verbs that were being identified so we can make sure that we could do it.
And in many of the policies, we say or designate after the superintendent. Would that be a fair addition?
I wouldn't object to it, but to be very transparent, I feel like I wouldn't mind there being a designee or a delegation for the superintendent, but I feel like this holds the superintendent accountable.
Yes.
For any superintendent coming forward before anything is recommended before this board, I would like to have some assurances that the superintendent has delegated but reviewed, trust but verified, not just passed it off. And I'm not saying that Dr. Thomas is doing that at all, but I do want some accountability to say, if you're recommending this to this board, you stand on this, you have reviewed it, because we're making you accountable for making sure that's done. Whether you do it, whether you delegate it to somebody else, that is operational, that is how you see it. But per the policy, this board expects for you to do everything listed in this policy.
I think that is something that would be doable. I know that the board doesn't approve the recs, but we do have operational processes that I think we could develop a rec that you could see, okay, so this is the process in which we adopt instructional materials that the superintendent oversaw or implemented, so you all would know the process, and then the expectation is that her designee or she would follow that process that you would be aware of, and then it would meet the policy as the superintendent or the designee has implemented that.
So I noted that this, in particular, being a new policy, I was actually happy to see the absence of or designate, because I believe that just the powers of the superintendent gives her that right to be able to do that, to create a committee, to delegate responsibility to different departments. And so that, to me, was, again, back for my purposes, I was happy not to see those words.
So, but the verb is shall, the superintendent shall, which implies in many cases, is the actual one reviewing the textbook. So I guess the wording is not consistent with that philosophy.
So, and this may be a product of my profession, but shall is a requirement. That's the rule, that's the
Yes.
law. And so when I think about this policy, I think of it as a shall. The superintendent has that authority to delegate it, but the superintendent shall make sure that this is done. The superintendent shall develop an ongoing program. If the superintendent wants to consult with someone or to delegate it and have them report back to her and she approve it or he approve it and it's presented, that will take care of that shall for me. But I want to be very clear that when we are hiring a superintendent, when we are holding our superintendent accountable, the expectation is there that you are the person that this board has hired to run this school district. Here are the clear expectations for you, and now you go and do operations. And whether or not that looks like regulations, for me, I mean, I'm okay if the regulations are in there or they don't have to be, but the expectation is there that however the superintendent gets it done, that superintendent is going to be held accountable, because it's very clear that this is the expectation that you shall do. So those are just my thoughts. I'm just happy to be discussing the policy. I welcome any comments, any feedbacks. We can change it, but I do want us to make sure that these things are not just philosophical and feel-good things that we kind of talk about, but it's done and it's clear.
And we have one person accountable, which I really like.
I was going to say, and I think you all talked about this in the meeting that I couldn't make. I can't remember if this was one of the ones, Ms. Hull, or not. Okay. I think my only concerns, I have a few. One is that I don't believe that some of the information in here and some of the tasks in here should be delegated to one person. I think it is, so when we look at curriculum content specifically, the superintendent shall review current, and I'm sorry if I'm reading what you all already see, but the current and proposed courses of study and textbooks to detect any bias based on, you know, all of the areas of sex, race, color, and then it goes on. I mean, it lists a lot of different important areas, and it says that they should ascertain whether or not supplemental materials, singly or taken as a whole, fairly depict the contribution of both genders, various races. I think it is aspirational, but I don't think it's practical. And neither do I think there are any teeth to it. And so what we hold the superintendent accountable for is what is in the superintendent's evaluation, right? Because this says this is what the superintendent will do. So let's just say the superintendent reads the books and the curricula, and in their opinion, they have detected bias. Because bias is going to be there. If we look across all of our curricula, the things that we read, because it's created by people, that's not necessarily right, but it's a product of who we are. Then what? What does this policy say? It's only saying the superintendent will read through and identify bias, but then what do we expect the superintendent to do with that? So one is that I don't think it's practical that one person should be responsible for all of this. Can I answer that question? Sure.
So my concern, and I get what you're saying, I'll continue to think that that is delegable. However, my concern with if not having this is Dr. Gaskins, can I just use you as an example since we're talking about curriculum? So if we have a big brouhaha because something is just horrible in a textbook, and we look at the superintendent, and the superintendent says, well, I didn't do that, that was Mr. Gaskins, he was in charge of curriculum. We can't do anything to Mr. Gaskins. We can't hold him accountable in any way, but making sure that that superintendent has the responsibility to make sure that these things happen gives that superintendent an evaluation criteria that they know he or she will be evaluated on should these things not happen. And I get you in terms of subjective things like biases, but I also feel like, why would we hire a superintendent that does not know how to review curriculum or delegate that responsibility to make sure that these things aren't happening? Like, that is a basic level competency for somebody that should be running the district. Not that you have to have an expertise in everything, but you should know how to be able to look at curriculum content, or at least delegate that to somebody in your cabinet and come back and have it reported to you if you're gonna hold that title, in my opinion.
I do want to sort of push back a little bit, because I don't think that your average person is expertise in picking out bias. If we were, I think we wouldn't have some of the outcomes that we do have. I think that because it's here, it sets the aspiration. But again, it does nothing for the expectation that we hold the superintendent accountable, right? And so we could take all of the policies that we have, and then if we go and look at like an evaluation instrument or our strategic plan, that is what we're holding the superintendent accountable for. So whether they do this or not, if it's not a part of the evaluation, policy doesn't automatically, I guess what I'm saying, it doesn't equate to this being an evaluation measure. I'm not saying it's not something we need. So I don't want you to hear me saying that, and I am very curious about like the public input. I just, you know, from doing the work of bias, you know, helping people identify biases and things like that is not this intuitive thing that people know even in their own interactions. And so it's certainly, I don't know that superintendent training programs, you know, there's this added element there. I feel that even if you know how to review curricula, it's still something a little bit different. And I think it was another portion too, where it talked about, I think you may have referenced this, Ms. Hull, about I think it was about a professional training program. I'm trying to remember which one it was. Staff training. About the superintendent developing ongoing programs of in-service training for school personnel designed to identify and solve problems of color, racial, gender, religious. So after they identify those programs that are aimed to solve those problems, it goes back to, what if they identify a program and we're not thinking that it's going to solve it, you know? It's sort of this thing that puts it out there as aspirational for a superintendent to come in and say, hey, but I would argue that then has to be their area of expertise. And if we've, you know, I think as a board collectively, we've said we want this to be the superintendent. We don't want someone else to be responsible for really building the capacity of the district. I see the aspirations as necessary. I just don't know that the outcomes will be what we imagine. And that's not necessarily a reason not to do it, but I wanted to sort of express, you know, some of those concerns, because partly I think we've sort of been down a little bit of this road before when we talk about how do you address equity, right? And then the community has one way, and then the superintendent has a different way, and then other people say, no, that's not how you do it. You know, it opens up this wide open space that we expect the superintendent to do something that maybe collectively we have not even necessarily said, this is how we define equity, and this is how we, you know, these are the specific biases that we're looking for, and this is what we're going to hold you accountable for. This is what it's going to look like by way of your evaluation tool, and maybe this is the start to that. You know, I won't argue that, but I just wanted to share that.
So a couple of things that I noticed, and one has already been talked about, whether it's the superintendent or a designee, because I do think that it's not realistic to think that the superintendent is going to do each of these things, him or herself. But I think we already talked about adding a designee or something. And then your example, and I understand that we want to be able to hold the superintendent accountable. for even things that are done by members of the cabinet or people she oversees, but I think that is what we're supposed to do already. So even though, if let's say Mr. Gaskins picked a terrible textbook, we felt like, well, we can't do anything to Mr. Gaskins or we can't hold him accountable, but we can hold the superintendent accountable for the things that people do in the district, because the superintendent is ultimately responsible she oversees everything. So I think that even without specifically saying that, that is something that is already part of the job. But then my other issue was that I appreciate trying to include all the possible ways that there might be bias, but I feel like in doing that, we run the risk of leaving something out. So just for one example, like the first one talks about fairly depicting the contribution of both genders. So then we just say that we're just saying that there are two genders, and so then that could potentially be leaving out people who don't identify with either gender. And that's just an example. Like, I feel like the more things you put in or the more specific you are, the more you run the risk of leaving something out that's not covered. So I wonder if there's a way to not be so specific and just kind of talk about more generally, trying to avoid any bias.
So again, when I read this policy, thank you for bringing that out, because I don't think I thought that deeply into it. But I did read all of the state references and federal references down here, and there's absolutely nothing we can put in a policy that supersedes the law. And so I don't think this is asking for anything more, in my opinion, than, again, having something that is concrete that brings equity to the forefront of our strategic plan. We talk about it in the strategic plan. We talk about it as a method, but we don't have anything that supports us actually doing it. So when I think about having the expertise, I don't think there's a single person in the world with the expertise to do everything that has to be done to run a district. So I think strongly that there will be designees, and we do hold the superintendent responsible for building an organizational structure that allows the district to be successful in the aspirational things that we want to do. So I'm not sure why this is such a problem. I'm not. So, and adding designee doesn't change that for me. So I'm good.
So I don't have a question. I have more of a concern and a strong suggestion for us as board members. So my concern is our current evaluation process, because it sounds like people are saying we don't need this because we have an evaluation process. But the evaluation process has not been on time since before I got on board. And I don't think we do a very good job of holding anybody accountable because we still don't have results in any area. And we also have a really hard time scheduling meetings or sacrificing any time to make anything a priority. So until we have any of that in place, I think it's necessary for us to be looking at things like this, because we don't have an evaluation process that has been working. We don't have an accountability process that has even been put in place. So, like, it's not, at some point, we're gonna have to look at ourselves and say, we're not doing a good job at evaluation or accountability.
I think I would agree with that. I look at this as a friendly debate, so I'm going to counter that we don't have any process. Now, if we have a process that where 1, 2, or 3, or a core of us we don't collectively say, this is the outcome of that, then that's the different thing. And I think this just goes back a little bit to what was said earlier. I think it's not that I'm against an equity policy. The urgency is with the outcomes. And a policy does not necessarily create outcomes. It doesn't create outcomes for the superintendent, and it doesn't always create an outcome necessarily for a student. And so unless we're specific, your policy is, our policy might be general, but it's still not operationally defined, and this is what we're going to look for. And so although that may be an issue, this policy won't fix the process. It won't fix an evaluation process. That is work that collectively, at least a quorum, has to be committed and saying, this is what we're gonna do at whatever, at whatever cost. Again, these are sort of some counter things that came to mind. I think, after we put it out for review, and whatever the board decides collectively, I think all of us will move with it, because I know, Ms. Hull, this has been something that you have brought before us before, and that is something that is important. I just don't want us to get lost. We did a resolution a while back about, I think it was about sort of this general critical race, right? We did a response to that. We have an equity policy. These are all great things. The work, though, truly is in is how we get there, and having someone in place that says, this is how we're gonna get there, but first having a board that says, this is what equity is, and this is specifically what we're gonna be looking for in outcomes. And so I don't want us to miss the things that appear to be movement forward. I don't want us to miss those and interpret those as like solutions, because there's still work beyond that. I think that's my concern.
Yeah,
my
absolutely.
concern.
I agree. I wouldn't proffer this policy to be the solution, but I definitely think it is a part of it. I do think it is a step one. And I would respectfully disagree about the premise of policies. If our policies don't shape the district and provide overview of what we want to have happen, what is our purpose? We have absolutely no purpose as a board. And I think that as we go through and we refine our processes for accountability and we refine our process for superintendent evaluations, that we make sure that these things are done in tandem and that they work together. And I think that if a problem is we don't have a definition for equity, we define it. We make that a priority and we add to the work. And if we don't have operations, we kind of don't, that's not what we do. So that's not up to us. And so, I definitely don't think this is the solution, but I do believe that it is a step one because it does something that at least gets the conversation going. And I don't think we'll ever have all of the pieces. And I love this. I love the healthy debate. My invitation is, anything that you don't like, what is the solution that you're bringing forward from it? So is there a proffer? Is there an amendment? Is there a redraft or a correction so that we can work to get this going? But this is important, and we don't have, this is something new. I like the conversation. I'm welcome to everything that my colleagues have to say because that's why we're up here. So I put it there, and I think I'll just end with saying this is step A, and we can have all the way through Z and triple A and triple Z again.
I would like to say, I'm not against this equity policy, but I have toyed with it in my mind. I believe that where we should start with is we just talked about all the things that we don't have that's not working according to, personally, each of one of us. Is going back to the strategic plan where we said that we were going to run equity in, through, and all around, okay? So I believe that let's go back to that and, let's start there with defining what equity is and making it where it's consistent at that focal point right there, since that really is our driver, including the superintendent evaluation. So I think that solutions have been kind of thrown out there. It's just that I think we're just going back to the basics of the strategic plan. Not to say that this equity policy would not be woven, like you said, and part of that, but I believe just starting back, at the basic level, the strategic plan, and just taking some serious time to discuss what do we mean by equity? What do we mean that it is, woven into all four of those pillars? What does that mean? And that may take some time working through that, but I think if we could really truly work through that process, then that'll get us to the next step of working through what we are requiring of our superintendent and how that goes back to that strategic plan. And then we could move from there.
My question was really just a process question. So with these policies that are at the point of review by the board, if we vote them today, they go out for public comment? Or do we have time as a board to make our own sort of suggestions or comments, as Attorney Hall was saying, before it goes out for public comment? Or do we do that all at the same time?
You're not necessarily taking a vote tonight, Dr. Dykeman. So yes, you are basically, we're logging the input that the board is giving now. And so if there's any revisions or changes, there's time to do that. So any changes you all would like made to the policy, we're able to do that at this time. That's why this process is twofold. This policy would then go out to public comment. It comes back, you all get to see it again. So you almost see it twice before it's ever even voted on. So yes, you can definitely submit revisions, recommendations. I think as Attorney Hull said, if there's any input you all want to give for edits and revisions, we can make that happen. It's not permanent, and there's no vote being taken on it. It's almost like this is a version of a policy committee meeting at a board meeting.
We're not voting on these today. So there's a separate category that would be go out for public comment, but we don't have any of those this week. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
But we're not voting to put it out either, or are we?
No, I don't think we are. I think we are, it's sort of, it is confusing, but I think this sort of serves almost as a policy committee meeting. You're right, I think.
Except that it's a lot longer, just want to notice.
What was that?
It's a lot longer than a policy committee meeting.
Okay, so from this point, we can submit comments on this, and we will see it again before it goes out for public comment. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Dr. Dykeman, can you say that again?
So we can make comments about this, changes can be incorporated, and then at another meeting, we will vote to put it out for public comment. No, Lisa's shaking her head no.
So we're at number 6, I believe, on policy BDC. So now, the superintendent or designee presents a draft proposal to the board at a work session. We ask clarifying questions, and the board will take no official action at this meeting. And then the next step will be the superintendent or designee will post information on the district website to alert employees and the public to the proposed policy and the opportunity to submit comments. So we're not taking any action.
No, but it does sound like, and just for the public, I promise you, we're adjusting. We got rid of our committees, and so this is a part of that adjustment phase. But Ms. Hull, yeah, my understanding that it does go out to public comment after this discussion, but we don't take a vote, we don't take action on it to go out to public comment.
Right, so in my mind, which is sometimes a scary place, there can be a pause. But since we're asking the clarifying questions and we're not taking action, there should be an opportunity for any edits to be inputted before it goes out to public comment. So in my mind, I'm thinking you could still permit or send in the edits or any type of remarks or comments, and those will get tacked on or redrafted before it goes out to public comment, right?
That's my understanding, but also that ideally, in an ideal world, and I know we're still working through some growing pains here, that would happen here, collectively, right? So the person who, like you all who have worked on the policy, or Dr. Harris, you all would have like that it is from the consensus of the board versus like Lakeisha over here saying delete this and delete that and then just put out, these 3 things.
But also, I mean, I'm fine with it either way. I think that we can also be making comments at the same time that public is making comments.
That's true, because also once it comes back from public comment, it'll be back on here. So we may get feedback from the public as well that gives us something, like to think about. So that's true.
And the cabinet. It looks like we'll get comments, the cabinet will be able to review the comments as well, and I guess add any additional input.
Yes.
If I may, Dr. Gant, part of the logic behind that is to get the public comment up front so that you all can consider what the public has to say about the policy prior to you all approving. So in the past, we push it out for public comment, we get comments, then we push it back to the committee to make the revisions, to push it back to the board. And it just kind of became this cyclical process versus now we get the public comment up front. And as you all just stated, you can give comments throughout. This policy is in revision mode. So we have 4 to 5 weeks to continue to revise based off the comments and input that we're gathering. But again, we can, we make changes to policy BDC. We can also change that process.
Dr. Dykeman, does that?
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to know what we were doing.
Okay. Yeah, me too. But I think some of it is like, because it is new and in transparency, it does feel very different. And I am thankful, Ms. Hull and Dr. Harris for like bringing us to where we are in policy. And for us to just sort of have in our head, how this is working. I think this is almost our first iteration of like going through the full process. So, yes.
And so if we do have suggestions or comments, we should send them to Dr. Harris. Okay.
Yes.
May I
Attorney
address?
has-
Never mind. Oh, were you going to call
No,
on
sir.
me?
I was
Thank you
calling
very
you.
much. May
Mr.
I
Pruitt?
just
Yep.
clear up one thing, just the point you started discussing, sort of the technical of, does it have to say or designee? That's kind of uncommon, and I think this is where Attorney Hull's coming from, because you don't usually see the word or designee in statutes. For example, and I looked it up, pulled the first one off the list here. This is from 7 USCA 1593C of the Federal Code. The Secretary of Agriculture is authorized and directed to investigate, determine, establish, and promulgate from time to time such reasonable standards of germination for each kind of vegetable seed as will, in his judgment, best protect crop production. I don't think Congress is expecting the Secretary of Agriculture, who's probably a politician and not an agronomist, to do that personally. That's just how it's typically stated. And that's the head of the agency, so they're held accountable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pruitt. All right. Ready to move forward? All hearts and minds?
All hearts and minds clear, and thank
Okay.
you, colleagues, for this healthy discussion. I really enjoy when we have these discussions. I think it helps move our district forward. Thank you.
And thank you for your efforts, and I know you and Dr. Anderson and working on pulling this together, and Ms. Davis. Ms. Davis, you have a,
I was just want to ask if we're going to have a break.
yes, okay. Can we knock out the policies for approval? Because
Yes.
these are ones that have already been out, and then we'll take a break between the action items.
That would be great.
Okay,
Since 5
so
o'clock,
we'll move
thank you.
forward to the policies for approval. Dr. Harris, any updates with these?
No, ma'am, there is actually no public comment. And actually, policy DJEAC is a perfect example of the process going through the full iteration. So the board gave input on the credit card policy, the purchasing policy at the meeting a month ago, and we were able to integrate those changes, put it out for public comment for 4 weeks. And now the policy is back before you with no additional changes. So no, there's no public comment on any of the 4 listed before you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Harris. I just asked Mr. Gaskins, like, we did? I don't, just can't remember any of this. But, all right, so no additional information, so I'm gonna open the floor for a motion for policy DJEAC.
I move that we approve policy DJEAC, purchasing credit card use.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hull. Is there a second? Was that a second, Ms. Davis? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any follow-up questions or comments? All right, all in favor of approving policy DJEAC, if you would, raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Dr. Anderson, was that in favor of or in opposition to?
Yeah. No, it wasn't I.
Okay, and aye in favor of?
Can you hear me? Mm-hmm, yes. In favor.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that you're on the line, Dr. Anderson. Policy JBA, this is the compulsory attendance ages policy. The floor is open.
As I read this policy, everything is in red, so I'm assuming that this is a rescission for JBA.
That's my understanding. Dr. Harris?
I cannot hear the question. I apologize.
Okay, can you restate that, Ms. Davis?
When I look at this policy in Assembly, all of the text in the policy is red and it's is stricken through. Does that mean we are rescinding this policy?
Yeah, so this is the policy that appears compulsory attendance in law. And so it's no longer, we rescinded it to, it's not required to be in our policy manual because state law trumps our local policy. I believe that's why we did that one, right, Mr. Pruitt?
Okay. It just said approved, but we're actually approving a rescission here.
You can make a motion to rescind.
Okay, I'll do that. I move that we rescind policy JBA.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Davis and a second by Ms. Hull. Any follow-up comments? Okay, all in favor of rescinding this policy, JBA, if you would, raise your hands and say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. We'll move forward to policy GAK1, criminal background check. The floor is open.
Move that we approve policy GAK 1, criminal background check.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Davis, a second by Ms. Hull. Comments, discussions, questions?
I had a question about, and I don't know if it falls under this policy, but I couldn't find it anywhere else. This is for employees only, right? Is that, this policy is?
Yes.
So my question was, I know that there had been some people who had wanted to volunteer in the schools, and there was some discussion about whether there were background checks necessary or not. Is there a policy for that? I couldn't, and what is it? Because I couldn't find it. It's an I policy?
Dr. Yeager or Ms. Hull, would you all know that
Yeah, I'll have to,
offhand, or-
give me a few minutes, I'll find it, but I know where it is.
So anyway, it's fine. If it's there, you can tell me later. I just wanted to make sure that that was addressed somewhere.
that it did exist in a,
Yeah, the G policy is all personnel, and then I is institutional programs, and so that would be, like you said, where that's going to show up.
okay, so we have a motion on the floor and a second for GAK1. Dr. Dykeman, did you get your, while Dr. Dykeman is looking that up, any other questions or comments? All right. Dr. Dykeman, do you feel you have the information you need to?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. All in favor of adopting policy GAK1, if you would raise your hands and say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed, the same signs? Okay, we're going to move forward to policy JBC1. Okay.
Okay, under, everything is correct as it relates to the changes that will be made, but under the second paragraph where it says the homeless liaison, in order for us to remain consistent, it's the McKinney-Vento liaison. That's the only piece that was missing from this, this draft. And remember, we're changing that language, so that's my only concern for tonight.
Where is that at again?
It's the second paragraph under the superintendent shall ensure, and then the second sentence, the homeless liaison.
Yeah.
We're changing that to McKinney-Vento. So just to make sure we're consistent with our language. All right, thank you.
Ms. Davis, thank you, Dr. Watley.
So in that same paragraph, we marked out homeless students and changed it to students experiencing homelessness. Will we do the same for the title of JBC 1? Shame on Assembly. Okay.
All right.
We really need to do that because it's inconsistent, right?
I vaguely remember this conversation, but I can't fully, I feel like it is something that that question that may have come up with this.
It's come up before a few times where the title of the policy is inconsistent with the content of the policy, and it's hard to change the name.
But I don't think it's necessarily assembly thing. I think it's, yeah, it's GSBA. It's those policy letters are the same across different districts and have the same titles.
They what now?
It's a GSBA thing, so there are other districts that have the same JBC policy called homeless students, and so those three letters always have that same title across the state.
But why did we change our text to students experiencing homelessness? Was that not one of the, I thought there was some legal reason for doing that. No?
It's just for clarification for, well, let me just back up. Homeless students just insinuate something different instead of a student experiencing homelessness. It's just a different way to say it, and we just decided to change the language because that may be considered a little bit offensive, and so you're experiencing homelessness. Does that make sense, Ms. Davis?
It absolutely does, and so therefore we should be able to change that title, because it means
Okay, I cannot
everybody.
change. I don't. I don't know
There
how
you
to do
go. We're there. Thank you.
All right, so do we have a motion on the floor?
So I move that we approve policy JBC1 with the revision of changing the verbiage in the second paragraph to read, the superintendent shall ensure the designation of the McKinney-Vento liaison.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hove. Is there a second? Ms.
Second.
Gallagher, Ms. Gallagher made a second. Any follow-up questions or clarifications?
I would like for us to petition GSBA to change the title.
Noted. Y'all are going to be at GSBA next week.
I'll be sure and bring it up.
I will be right at your side.
All right, all in favor of approving policy JBC1, homeless students, if you would, raise your hands and say aye.
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 Any opposed?
I have a dilemma.
All right.
have a dilemma. I'll vote yes. But I do have a dilemma, so yeah, I want it changed.
Okay, so that, was that
That's a yes.
everyone? Okay. All right, we are at a breaking point, but also a breaking point. We're gonna take a 10-minute break. It's 8:59, we're gonna resume at 9:10, okay?
Well, was that a Freudian slip?
It was.
Yeah, Sheen, I order for Sheen all the time.
Yeah, I'm still here. It sounds like y'all are partying.
Could I encourage us to start? It's 10 after.
Okay, so, okay, we're gonna continue, and actually, we are at 13, and this is item 13.1, and this is our June personnel report. Mr. Gaskins, is there any additional?
We recommend that you approve the personnel report, 13.1 as presented.
Okay, thank you. The floor is open.
I move to approve the June personnel report.
Okay,
Second.
we have a motion by Dr. Dykeman, was seconded by Attorney Hull. Any follow-up questions? Okay, all in favor of approving the personnel report in 13.1, if you would raise your hands and say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that motion passes. We are going to move,
I have a question.
yes,
Online, I see item 13.1, June personnel report. My printed copy shows item 13.2, the addendum, so we moved that already. Oh, you are so efficient, thank you. Scared me there. Okay, I'm good. I have no question.
okay. All right, so we'll move forward to our action items under number 14. And there are 18 of these, I think. And so we'll start with action item 1. And these are the May 5th call meeting minutes. Item 2 is the May 5th work session minutes. Item 3 are the board meeting minutes from May 12th.
I move that we approve items 14.1, 14.2, and 14.3.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hull.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Hull and a second by Dr. Maddox. Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor of approving 14.1, 14.2, and 14.3, if you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Any opposed, the same signs? Dr. Anderson, did you say aye for in favor of?
I did, but I think I was muted, so yes, aye.
Okay. Thank you. So that motion passes. We'll move forward to item 4. This is the general budget.
I move that we approve the general budget for FY23, item 14.4.
My second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Hull, a second by Dr. Yeager. Any follow-up questions or thoughts?
I do have questions and I have thoughts, and so I submitted several questions for which I haven't yet received an answer around 2 items especially. One is what I believe one of the hallmarks of this budget is our contract with the state of Georgia to remain a charter district. And I have not received an answer, or I believe that the board voted that we would pursue a charter district designation, but the board did not vote to approve the contract that was submitted to the state. And if that is indeed under the purview and the prerogative of the board, or the responsibility of the board, then I would ask that we not actually go forward with a budget that is based on that recommendation. The second item in the budget that I'm concerned about is the implementation of a charter, not a charter school, but we have moved forward with building a staff around a community schools model. The board initially approved the hiring of a director to define what a community school model would be for our district. The board has not received the full report of what that recommendation is, yet we have hired people to implement this project. I would want the board to approve this direction because it is a change in direction in terms of how we operate, and it is also the basis of our budget. So for those two reasons, I feel strongly that the general budget should not be approved until the board has taken action to set direction for the district and the future of education for our kids in Clark County.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Davis. Others?
Just to clarify.
Can I ask for clarification? Sorry, this is Dr. Anderson.
Go ahead, Dr. Anderson.
Okay, could I ask for clarification from Ms. Davis on if we were to move forward with not approving the budget today or discussing the budget approval process today, what specific items that were presented in the budget directly impact the two things that you are concerned about with the charter and the community schools? So are there specific items in the budget that you want us to think further about, or you want Mr. Schoeneman to think further on? So could you please elaborate on what specifically in the budget you're addressing with regard to community schools and the charter system application?
The entire budget is built on the premise that we will implement or continue to implement our charter schools initiative that we signed up for 5 years ago. And so the entire budget is built on that. So every item in the budget, I would think, is reflected in that decision. The second part of your question was a specific question that I had asked earlier about the cost of implementing a community schools model. I have not received any information about those costs. I am assuming that those costs are embedded in personnel and any other initiative. But again, we have not had a presentation on exactly what the cost would be to implement that model. So I cannot be any more specific than I have been in lieu of the fact that I do not have answers to the questions that I had submitted earlier.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Dykeman?
I was just going to ask a clarification question. Also, we did vote, as you mentioned, Ms. Davis, we did vote to approve the charter system application. And I was under the impression that we would not approve the final application. Is that something that we do as a board?
We approved to go forward with pursuing renewing the charter application.
Yes.
We, in the 10 years, well, this is the first time we've done that, is it not? Since we became a charter district, I think, yeah, this is the first time we've done it. And so in my previous experience, we approved continuing to move down that path of being a charter district, but we also approved the final charter application. And so until we requested that, we did not see that application. It is in that application that you see a reference to community schools. And so again, we have we've submitted a charter that says something about community schools, but I don't know, maybe everybody else knows what that means, but I don't know what's involved in being a community school. I do not know what the cost is involved in being a community school. I do know that reading the information, and it was extensive information, and I really appreciate Dr. Harris providing that booklet to me, to all of us actually, in the last presentation. And I read that information, and I went online and I read, and there is an actual organization and a national movement to have community schools replace or become the solution for our failing public school system. So it brings with it not just the wonderful things that are happening in our community with our community school organizers, but it brings a commitment to become a part of a national movement to transform education in America. I think that's significant. I think that we should look at that as a board and decide if that's something we want to be a part of or how we want to be a part of that. And that's what we should be voting on. And I think that has not been clear and is not transparent. There's even a document online that someone has the authority to sign to say that we want to become a part of that movement. No one has presented that document to me, and maybe you guys have seen it. But again, this is a bigger deal than just the two words, community schools, is what I'm saying. And I think it's a change in the strategic direction, and I think we need further explanation on that. I hope that helps.
So I guess my original question was just whether or not, I was not on the board when the original charter application went through, so I don't know whether, as a board, we are to approve the final application, or do we just vote, as we did, to say that we wanted the district to submit an application?
I would find that not responsible in terms of our responsibilities, our elected responsibilities of being governance with the school district. We should definitely know what's inside that charter application. We should know what we're trying to implement with that charter application.
But, so maybe Dr. Harris can answer, is that something that we vote on before it is submitted?
That's what we're trying to clarify. We're trying to see
Okay.
if Dr. Harris is still on the Zoom.
Okay.
I don't believe that he is, no.
I will note that in the June 2021 work session, Mr. Harris made a presentation to us about community schools.
Right.
That was a big update, as I recall.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine he defined what community schools were in that, and I remember that presentation talked a lot about the charter system. I don't have a copy of it. I'm trying to get it, but I don't
Well,
know.
if
Lisa,
you
can
read
you look? It's not in Assembly. There's sort of a blank there.
Mm.
It was the June 2021 work session, June 3rd.
Asked Dr. Harris about this, and he looked into it, checked with the state, and forwarded me an email he got from Lynn Plunkett at the State Department, who said that the BOE is required to sign the assurances and the resolution, but district is not required to submit documentation of local BOE's approval of the content of the application, nor does Georgia law require the local BOE to approve the actual application. Now, frankly, and I was trying to find a copy of the resolution. Frankly, I think the resolution says we hereby approve the application. But it's nonetheless, that's the direction from the Department of Education, so that's the procedure that was used.
And that procedure, again, let me be sure I understood. So we do not approve the application that we submit to the Department of Education that tells how we are going to govern the school district?
Well, that's what Lynn Plunkett says in her email. Well, not, but I think she means nor does Georgia law require the local BOE to approve the actual application. Again, that's the direction your staff was given by the Georgia Department of Education. I guess I should stop right there.
Thank you. Then I'll pick up right there because I don't understand how the staff can commit the board to a strategic direction that the board is not aware of.
I guess I would disagree. The charter application exactly mimics our strategic plan, piece by piece by piece. Everything is aligned to the strategic plan, which we did approve. That's what if you look at the application, that's what it is all about, is our strategic plan. And the action items that we're talking about in this charter system board that I'm on is entirely aligned to the strategic plan, which we approved.
I
So I
hear
don't
what you're
understand what the conflict is.
Okay, I understand what you're saying too. And what I'm saying to you is that we have had a presentation on community schools. I am suggesting to you that the organization that is known as community schools is a separate entity. It is not a part of the State of Georgia Department of Education. The DOE does not mention community schools when I go to their website. And so that is now a part of our charter application.
I don't think so.
And I don't know how we are going to implement something that we don't understand what it is.
I don't know what the organization of community schools is. That seems, it may have the
That's the
same
thing that I'm
name.
hung up on,
It
yeah.
has the same name,
Right.
but the community schools presentation that we were given and our strategic plan is very much focused on connections between our school district and the community, which we've all agreed is a good thing. And so when we talk about community schools, or the charter plan talks about community schools, that's what we're talking about. I don't know what this thing is that you're
It's the thing
talking
that's
about,
in
this
that binder
movement.
that he gave us.
This is the movement in the binder?
Yes. And it has 4 pillars of strategy that we have adopted, it looks like, in that organization to follow. And then when you go to the website and look at that organization, it has a proclamation or a commitment.
So you do
that you're
remember
to
the
sign.
community
And
schools
I sent that to
presentation?
you earlier today.
So you do remember his presentation then?
I have the presentation, yes, which made me look further.
Okay,
Because it's a
I'm confused
strategic
about
movement.
your, what you're objecting to. You just said we didn't define community schools, but we have.
We didn't what now? We haven't defined it, but we have a binder that tells what the national organization is for community schools. And so did the board agree to become a part of this national organization and movement for community schools is the question that I'm asking.
And so, as it relates to item 4, approving the FY23 general budget, I hear the concerns that you've registered, Ms. Davis. Can someone remind me, do we have a motion and a second?
You do.
We do have a motion and a second. Are there any other concerns? Any other discussion related to this action item?
I've said all I know.
Okay. All in favor of approving the FY23 general budget, if you would, raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Okay.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed, the same signs?
Aye. Can I echo myself? Aye.
Okay. So that was 2 opposed.
No, just me. Did you see 2? Oh, we have 2?
Okay. So we have 2 opposed. Did you get that? Yep. 6-2. Yes. Thank you. Okay. And we'll move forward to 5. This is the millage rate. The floor is open.
I move that we approve the millage rate of 18.8. Is that right? 18.8.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Davis. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Follow-up discussion or questions? I guess my only comment would be, I'm still sort of holding firm to the 19.9. I meant the 19. And I would really like to see, I know with Mr. Schooneman, we start the process of budgeting pretty early, I think, in the fall. And so it really encourage my colleagues to, support me in expecting like a plan, of what it's going to look like, other than the local supplement. I think the local supplement is great, but a plan early in the budgeting process, to the extent possible, of what it might look like, so that we can have it not just as a supplement, but after this year as a part of, the ongoing income of our lowest paid employees. Yes. Can you come to the microphone for me?
I don't know if that's one thing that curtails you about really coming up with, a budget earlier than we do is that we don't know the QBE until April. So everything really comes in at a very late time, and that's the reason why we're on the schedule that we are. unfortunately, you can't do it in the fall because, you know, they vote on the QBE numbers in March and April. So that really curtails the whole process. So.
And so I wonder, is it possible to, I know, so what I hear you saying is no way to know until April.
Right.
And even that is sort of tentative because it has to go through a process.
Exactly.
I'm wondering if it's possible with the board's support and of course the superintendent collectively saying this is a priority. And so even as we're starting the process early, we can still have this process with that goal in mind.
Yeah, you can make some really good estimates and just kind of as you get, you know, really hard numbers, you know, keep everybody updated as soon as you can. But you can usually make pretty accurate estimates, but they are estimates until you really get the hard numbers, say in the March, April timeframe. But it would be good, I think it would be good to go ahead and come up with maybe a tentative schedule, tentative numbers, so that lets you look at them and be able to get a feedback, and if they change, when they do change, let you know. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sort of to that point, I wonder if it would be possible to, and if this would be too much work, then you can ignore me, but to create a budget of what you would like to have for the following year without knowing how much money was going to come in, but just like, if we could do all the things that we wanted to do, here's how much it would cost, and then kind of
yeah, you can come up with those kind of scenarios. You know what your goals are, and see if they fall in place, and what would it take to do that. Yeah,
right.
Sure. Yeah.
I have a question, just, I don't know who's gonna answer it. Clark County School District does not have a grant writer, correct? A grant writer. Thank you.
We do not?
Someone repeat that question. I didn't get that.
I was just clarifying, or I was asking if Clark County School District has a grant writer, and we don't.
But we do write grants.
Yeah, we do.
Ms. Higginbottom writes, how many grants a year do you write? A few.
And she's not the only one.
I was asking if we had a grant writer. We need more money. The Office of Early Learning, fighting for money for the Office of Early Learning is different from fighting for money or seeking money for all students in Clark County School District K through 12. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? All right, so I think we have a motion and a second, right, for the millage rate?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor of approving the millage rate of 18.8, if you would, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, if you would, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye. Yeah, I oppose.
Okay, so we have a tie here, so that means that that motion does not pass. Is that correct, Mr. Pruitt?
Can we have another vote? I didn't see who voted against.
Do you want me to do a roll call, Ms. Palmer? Okay, the noes were myself, Ms. Gallagher, Ms. Hull, and Dr. Anderson.
Multiple
Okay.
sources. Do you want to ask me a question?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that that 4-4 meant that it did not pass.
4-4 means it does not pass.
Okay.
Now, the other question I was fielding that you may want the answer to is, you do have to approve a millage rate resolution. It doesn't just automatically carry over. The
Exactly.
mayor and commission has to have something.
Okay. And by what?
By Tuesday.
By Tuesday? Okay.
So today is,
And in the event that it's not,
what are we looking for?
So the people that voted no, what is it you want to happen?
Yeah.
And why didn't we talk
I
about
can't
this
s-
weeks ago?
I can't speak to the other people, and I did speak about it weeks ago. My position hasn't changed. I just want to be sure, I can be persuaded, but I really want to be sure that we are not putting ourselves in a place where we don't have the money that we need to have to get people up to $15 an hour. I won't even say that's a living wage now. I know that the superintendent's response to some of those concerns were the local bonuses. I'm blanking on the term right now. The supplements, thank you. But I guess I just want to be me personally. If we don't have any type of like money, then how do we have a plan? How do we build on a plan for next year? How do we not just depend on local supplements, right? That can be taken, that can be, you know, one year you might have them, you might get different leadership, you may not. And then the people whose hourly rates have been raised, they're back at the same place. So that's my concern.
So I thought we talked about this at the last meeting, and Dr. Blankenship said it would be $5 million, $4.2 million. And we talked about the rainy day fund, whatever the word is, the fund balance, thank you. We talked about the fund balance sitting at 25%, so it would not be a big problem to draw, at least for the coming year, to draw that down.
From the fund balance.
For a 1 year only kind of thing. I thought we talked about that as the solution, but I guess that wasn't a solution in your mind either then.
Well, I mean, if we
I
draw
have
from
another
it for
question.
1 year only, then what?
I'm curious as to, do we not expect this, what do we have, like a 12, 14%? They keep talking about a 10% increase in property taxes. That was not my experience. I think mine is closer to 30%. But the issue here also is this board voted for a TAD where we gave away the increases here, right? We have strong recommendations from our finance department, who have done an excellent job of calculating where we are and what we can and cannot afford. And so I am concerned that to not vote for this reduction for our taxpayers who have supported us all of this time, especially when we're in this tiny little bubble of a boom economy, is kind of saying to them that, you know, we don't really care. I would like to see us roll back this to the 18.8 that the budget was built on, by the way, so that we can move forward with showing appreciation to our community for their support over this long haul. I don't think this is necessarily germane to the ability to support living wages for our employees. I think there are a lot of other things that we've learned tonight in talking about what's happening in the district where we might be able to recover some of those costs and do some cost reductions. And so we haven't looked at what does it take to sustain this over the long haul. I think, again, if I'm going to vote in the minute now would be to not come back and revisit something that is absolutely mandated to move forward with the entire tax digest for the county. This would be the time to vote. If I were going to be skeptical, that would be the thing that I would not be skeptical about. That's just me.
So is it possible to make another motion for another millage rate and just vote on it?
You would make a motion for a millage rate that hasn't been vetted by the finance department or recommended by the finance department, we would do that.
Or offered to the community, in which we had to have those 3 hearings, where we offered it to the community. We would have to do that again.
So if we motion for another millage rate, we would have to have another cycle of public hearings, or was? I didn't think so.
Could I also jump in for 1 second?
Yeah.
Dr. Gant?
Sure.
So my no vote was actually because I wanted it decreased a little bit more. And I had a conversation with Mr. Schooneman separately in an email. So this is not, it's not like we're dumping this on the board suddenly. I mean, several of us had separate conversations with stakeholders. So I think it's unfair to say that we're just kind of surprising people. That's not really the case here. But I just wanted to make clear too that my no vote was not because I wanted to see it increase back to 20, but because I actually wanted to see it decrease slightly more to relieve taxpayers because of the huge increase in a lot of our property taxes that we've seen this year.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. And for me, ideally, it would be both and, right? That it can be reduced because that is something that's important. And I think you're absolutely right, Ms. Davis. I think it is the appropriate thing to do given where, our tax returns or digest the money is. And I think some type of plan of how we sustain the wages of employees is still important. So.
I don't think we've asked for what is the cost of giving that sustainable wage, and is it $15 an hour? Is it now up to $20 an hour? So we didn't get those numbers back from, now maybe someone else did. I did not get those numbers from Mr. Schooneman. So in our private conversations, if we're not sharing that information, this is our space for doing that. So if someone has already had him work those numbers, it would be good to know what the actual cost would be. And at that time, we were talking about taking it out of fund balance. And so what would that leave the fund balance at? So if we don't have the answers to that, I don't know why we would speculate on that right now.
Okay, so any recommendations regarding what we need? I mean, what I hear is that we need a millage rate approved by TUSA, and what we have here is a split vote, which means that the vote did not pass.
You need to pass a millage rate resolution before you leave, but let me point out one other thing. So you're required to have a balanced budget. You've already passed the budget. The budget was based on the 18.8 mills. So you definitely could not go down. If you go up, then at some point, finance is going to have to come to you with a budget amendment where they have assigned this extra revenue to some line item or combination of line items, because the budget process, as public officials, you're charged with figuring out how much money you need, making a budget, and then setting a millage rate that's sufficient to fund that budget. You don't set the millage rate and then figure out how to spend the money.
Thank you.
So I move that we rescind the vote to not approve the millage rate.
And because that failed, so you're open for just another motion. You can make another motion to approve the millage rate of 18.8 or whatever millage you want to state.
So I
I'll say
move,
it, maybe it'll go this time. Go for it. Go ahead.
so I move that we approve a millage rate of 19 mills. I did. That means the budget will have to come back, right? And so my thought behind that would be, I'm also remembering that we have like one school social worker per 100 students. And so that's where I am. Y'all can vote it down or not second it, but it's a motion.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment to the motion to approve a millage rate of 18.8, which is what the budget is built on, and that which we legally are required to approve.
I second that motion.
I think that was a totally separate motion. It sounded like, so Ms. Hall, you had a motion for 19,
I did, but it was not seconded.
yeah, it wasn't seconded.
So I think it went away.
Okay. Ms. Davis,
I move that we approve the millage rate of 18.8 on which our general fund budget has been built.
I second.
all right, we have a motion by Ms. Davis, back at the original millage rate of 18.8, and we have a second by Dr. Yeager. Any further discussion before we take a vote? All right, all in favor of approving the 18.8 millage rate, if you would, raise your hands and say aye.
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 Aye. All right, any opposed, same signs? We have Ms. Gallagher. Dr. Anderson?
Sorry, I think I was muted. Let's just go ahead and move on.
That was an aye for approval for clarification?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
All right, the millage rate is approved at 18.8. All right, we'll move forward to approve field trips.
So
moved.
Second.
Okay, we had a motion and a motion by Ms. Dr. Maddox, a second by Ms. Davis. Any thoughts or questions? All in favor of approving our field trips, if you would, raise your hands and say aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign. All right, we're going to move forward to item 7, which is clear concepts. And actually, I think we have several other contracts after this, so we can bundle.
I move that we accept approve the contract for Clear Concepts. I think I read that. Yes, I'm good with that.
Okay? Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, any questions or comments? All right, all in favor?
I got one.
Oh, go ahead, Ms. Gallagher.
This is for HR?
It's the
This a new one?
benefits, yeah. That's the one we just did last year before.
This is our benefits consulting
Right.
broker.
It's the same one?
Yes,
Yes.
it's the same one we've been using. They won the RFP.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how often are these reviewed? How often are these contracts reviewed?
Every 5 years.
Okay, that's why I didn't know about it.
Yeah, it's kind of, it seemed like it was quicker than 5 years this time. I don't know, but anyway, so I'm good with that, yeah. I can't be 5 years. Has it been that long? Sorry. Okay.
All right.
Veronica tells us when we have to put it out for bid again, so
Okay.
we just
I
follow, we do
believe
what
it.
Veronica says.
I saw the matrix. I'm good. Thank you.
All right, go ahead, Dr. Dyckman. Oh, the vote, okay. All in favor of approving Clear Concepts, if you would, raise your hands and say aye.
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 Any opposed? Dr. Anderson?
I was an aye.
For approving?
Approving.
Okay, all right, we'll move forward.
I move that we approve action items 14.8, school nutrition, 14.9, school nutrition, 14.10, approve 2022-2023 food contract, 14.11, approve Gaines Elementary School contracted services, 14.2, approve therapy travelers, 14.13, you get it. Approve maximum staffing service, 14.14, approval of beverage vending contract, 14.15, approval of the purchase of sports equipment for Cedar Shoals Fieldhouse. 14.16, approved Global Teacher Solutions MOU. 14.17, approve the lease and installation of a 6-classroom modular at the campus of the Clark Central High School. And 14.18, to approve the Clark County Family Connections FY 23 contract.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Hull to approve all of those items just named, and a second
I don't know who did.
by Ms. Davis. Okay, questions or comments?
I have a question. So the maximum, is that the one that we currently are depending on the staff positions?
Which one is that?
So Maxim is what we use to, can someone turn theirs off? Thank you. Yes, it's what we currently use to staff our vacant special education long-term vacancies. Yes.
I was actually surprised to read that. That was interesting. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor of approving all of the items named by Attorney Hull, if you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are going to move to item 15. This is future business. So as it stands right now, between Dr. Thomas and Ms. Palmer, they've done much better, and Dr. Anderson have, at keeping a list of our future business topics, and we're looking through them as we have the opportunity and like placing them either like if it's an agenda item or if it's like a retreat discussion. And so it may not be a quick turnaround is what I'm just trying to say. It may show up on a future agenda. It may be a retreat item, but we are trying to be diligent about being sure that we keep up with our future business items. So with that said, are there any future business items that any board member would like to add to that list? Dr. Yeager.
I think we've talked about having a representative from some charter districts come speak to the board about some of the really extraordinary innovations they've been able to do as sort of illustration of what we might be looking at as a district. So hearing from the people who've actually implemented charter system, and I know Mr. Harris has worked with Dr. Harris has worked with Mr. Nobles and sort of compiled a list of people, and I'd like to make sure we get one or two of them. It may mean we have to go to them, which could be interesting as well to see. And I don't know exactly in terms of a quorum, if we would all go to visit a school, if that counts as a meeting, a called meeting, or if it would be just a field trip, like a GSBA meeting, for example.
Thank you. Ms. Palmer has noted that, Dr. Yeager. Any others? All right, so I am going to open the floor for a motion. This is item 16, and just to remind us, we do have item 13.2 that was moved down after we get out of executive session that we have to come out and take action on. But I'm going to open the floor for a motion for an executive session to discuss or to enter into executive session to discuss or deliberate upon the appointment, employment, compensation, hiring, disciplinary action or dismissal, or periodic evaluation or rating of a public officer or employee, or to interview applicants for the position of superintendent.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Dr. Dykeman, a second by Attorney Hull. Any questions or comments? All right, all in favor of entering into executive session for the stated reason, if you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are going to enter into executive session at 9:56 p.m.
That's right. We can't do that, right?
Yeah, she was asking about
Okay.
participating in
No, I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna go ahead and leave. All right. Oh, yeah, hope it goes well. Bye.